Good morning and a very warm welcome to everyone. Ever since the introduction of the concept of gender mainstreaming at the 1985 Nairobi World Conference on Women, it has been adopted as a tool to promote gender equality at all levels by all countries around the globe. The Millennium Development Goals and the Sustainable Development Goals have taken gender equality as one of the major goals. However, the agenda of women's empowerment and gender equality is still unfinished. Gender mainstreaming has been adopted as a global strategy for attaining gender equality. Mainstreaming is not an end in itself, but a strategy, an approach, a means to achieve the goal of gender equality. It involves ensuring that gender perspectives and attention to the goal of gender equality are central to all activities. In the process of gender mainstreaming, there are a number of gender issues that need immediate attention. There have been various perspectives to understand the process of gender mainstreaming. However, none of them seem to be totally effective to fulfill the goal and achieve the target of leveling the gender divide worldwide. This 2 days online international conference is a collaborative endeavor of Bombay Teachers Training College, Department of Women's Study, University of Calicut, Faculty of Humanities, University of Johannesburg, Asian African Association for Women, Gender and Sexuality, and Association for the Schools of Social Work in Africa to provide a platform to assess and share the ideas and notions that may help us in this desired direction. Directions to form a bridge, to create a way for those made unequal to come together as one in equality, in human dignity. When society forgets that equality is our most basic nature, we are all God's children. So let us pray to the Almighty for helping us create a just, equal society.
ॐ सर्वे भवन्तु सुखिनः सर्वे सन्तु निरामया सर्वे भद्राणि पश्यन्तु मा कश्चित् दुःखभाग् असतो मा सद्गमया तमसो मा ज्योतिर्गमया मृत्योर्मा अमृतं गमया ॐ शान्ति शान्ति शान्तिः
Quoting Dolly Parton, singer and songwriter, if your actions create a legacy that inspires others to dream more, learn more, do more, and become more, then you are an excellent leader. I feel fortunate to have an excellent leader, Dr. Balani, Dean of Faculty of Humanities, HSNC University, and Principal of Bombay Teachers Training College, who through actions inspires not only his faculty but students to learn more and do more. His doctoral thesis on quality assurance model is mirrored in our day-to-day quality transactions. Sir, you have fostered a sense of support and appreciation that allows us as educators to improve our practice daily. Your hard work makes such a difference to ensure the learning and growth of both our students and faculty. Request you to kindly address the gathering.
Good morning to all.
Un-
It is indeed an emotional moment for me. But before I start, I would like to thank to all those professionals and professional colleagues who has contributed in visualizing and planning and executing this conference. I would like to thank Honorable Ameha Bomik, founder Lincoln University College, Malaysia, as a mentor, always supporting us in our all educational endeavors. He's a friend, philosopher, and guide for all of us. He's a source of inspiration. I welcome you, sir, on this platform. I'm also thankful to Mr. Harish Iyer, equal right activist, Ms. Rakhi Vaswani, celebrity chef and founder, Palette Culinary Academy, who have agreed to support us, extend their support uh, to set the role of this theme, because this theme is very, very close to our heart. The kind of violence and equality that we witness in our society is unbearable. And education is the only process whereas we can address these issues. It's not like that we are not trying to impart the right education to our children, but whatever we have been doing is not sufficient. There's need to do more from our side, and that's why we have come out from four walls of Bombay Teachers Training College, and we have opened up our deliberations throughout the world through the digital medium. I'm thankful to the entire BTDC family, especially the three girls, Dr. Neelu Verma, Dr. Lubna Mansuri, Dr. Raju Taleja, for taking up this issue, because we have been planning this international conference since July onwards. And it reminds me the words of Dr. Ameya Bomik that if you wish to plan, if you wish to execute international conference, then you must take the global issues and you must plan at least 6 months in advance. So, sir, based on your advice, based on your guidance, we started working on this. And we never wanted to do it all alone. We thought that we need to have like-minded people, because this is a big mission. BTDC is a small college. It cannot achieve all alone. So we wanted to reach out to the community. We wanted to reach out few more partners from India and from abroad. And we thought that now, since the same issue is resonating in our hearts, it is time for us to collaborate and take this issue forward. And I'm really thankful to Miss Lena Anand, Head Department of Women's Study, University of Calicut, to reach out us, and she has extended wholehearted support in planning this international conference. Professor Shahana Rasool, Associate Professor, Head of Department of Social Work, University of Johannesburg, Vice President, AAWGS. Dr. Molly Kuruvila, Professor, Department of Women's University, University of Calicut. She has been very instrumental in coordinating between the different collaborating institutions. Ma'am has done a wonderful job, has connected us to the all other institutions. Miss Mini Kumar, Assistant Professor, Department of Women's Studies, University of Calicut. Dr. Anita Singh, President, AAA WGS Professor, BHU, Varanasi. Dr. Gomso Jongman, University of Bostanaya, President of ASSWA, Professor Vibhuti Patel, a source of inspiration. Uh, I have attended many of her uh, sessions when I was doing refresher course, so I'm highly uh, 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 I appreciate her contribution in the field of education. and she has always guided us. And as a student, I've learned a lot from her. Ma'am, thank you for supporting this cause. And Dr. Madhavi Venkatesan. And there are many more are there. Uh, our colleagues are going to acknowledge their contribution. Now, when you look at the purpose of organization of this international conference is concerned, as I already said, that a lot of inequality is being observed by each one of us. No doubt, we had done from our side, but as I said, that we haven't done much from our side. And the kind of message that we need to give to our children, to our students, that message is theoretical. Now we need to take this message to the level of sensitivity, and this can be done only when you get engaged with the reality. And pandemic has taught us what happens when one is confined in four walls of house, and what happens if the freedom is snatched from you, and the kind of pain that gives to the psyche of the man. We have experienced it. The same thing is also happens when injustice takes place and the rights of one gender are not, we can say, acknowledged and are not given. Up till now, our society is was are divided in, we can say, the binary numbers, either zero, either one. We haven't identified the other genders, or as far as their social psychology is concerned, it means that we are not so educated. We may have acquired so many degrees, and we might have participated in so many conferences, presented so many papers, but in true sense, we have not educated ourselves. Because until and still, if your thoughts are not converted and translated into actions, you cannot reform the society. So I think this should be the step forward. We are looking forward to, and I'm very happy to know that we have received approximately or more than 100 research papers, which will be thoroughly scrutinized, presented, and later on published and put into the public domain. So I'm thankful to all the professionals, professors, educationists who has come forward and are going to participate and are going to present their papers in this international conference. I'm also thankful to all the participants who are registered more than 500 to be there supporting this cause for removing or mitigating the gender equality from the society. And this is what is our motto. As soon as pandemic situation is over, take up some few very concrete steps, whereas all our social soldiers, our children, our student teachers will come out from the four walls of the BTDC, and we wish to undertake such, we can say, concrete programs so that we can bring difference in the society, maybe creating awareness program, maybe undertaking certain projects which can create a little significant difference in the society. And this will help us to sensitize our children, our students in the society. BTDC is looking forward to train the teachers to take up the responsibilities as an administrator, as a manager, as a we can say technical professional, as a entrepreneur. And we will wish that all those girls enrolled at Bombay Teachers Training College, they become the ambassadors of the gender champions. We want to see them the future leaders who will work for the cause of this, and we are determined to adopt all those strategies, actions, so that we can play a significant and instrumental role in bringing all the stakeholders together, and can work in hand in collaboration with the institutions of which believes in our philosophy. And I'm very happy that I'm very lucky that I have got colleagues like Dr. Meenakshi, Dr. Rajija, Dr. Mandeep Kochar, Dr. Raju Talija. As I said, they are a great inspiration to me. Whatever the things that we decide, they take it like anything. as a front leaders, and till they achieve their objectives, they don't sit quiet. So I'm very happy the way they take the things forward, and I believe that we will be able to achieve many more milestones with uh, uh, I think the kind of team that we have got. So I appeal to you all that please stay connected with Bombay Teachers Training College. This should be the beginning. This should be the beginning of the new moment, and we will take it forward as soon as pandemic situation is over. Thank you. Thank you for being supporting this event. God bless you all. Thank you. Over to Nilu, ma'am.
Thank you, sir. Thank you for putting forth our ideas in front of everybody, greatly motivating us and taking lead in all what we do. Thank you. Taking our program further, let me introduce to you our chief guest for this morning, Professor Dr. Amia Bhaumik, who is a person who greatly supports us in all our endeavors, and we draw a lot of inspiration from him. Sir holds a double master's degree and a PhD in variety of disciplines like biology, culture and psychology, and international management. He is the founder, former vice chancellor, and now president of Lincoln University College Malaysia, which offers more than 95 programs, including various PhDs, MBBS programs via 12 different faculties. Lincoln University College has achieved 80th in world ranking university under Times Higher Education and Impact Ranking 2020 under Quality Education. He's a visionary leader for developing society via education and training, and that makes him unique. He has worked in many international organizations around the globe. While working with universities internationally, especially with the University of Ottawa in USA, he has gained various types of educational development work that include writing policies and strategies of education for various countries. He's traveled all across the globe with respect to spreading his ideas. He believes in President Abraham Lincoln's philosophy of providing education to each and every human being of the world. His life is based upon famous philosopher Swami Vivekananda that each and every human being is potentially divine. Dr. Amia believes through education, we can help each and every human being to manifest their hidden divinity, power, strength, and scholarships of wisdom to the humanity. He is one person who believes in the philosophy of work is worship. Thank you, sir, for joining us this morning and agreeing to deliver the keynote address. Over to you, Sir Bhaumik.
Namaskaram to everyone from Bombay Teachers Women College, and good morning, good evening. I know quite a number of participants beyond the shore of India, and good afternoon to me. My time is going to be almost 1 o'clock in the afternoon. I'm always encouraged, enlightened by the Teachers College, the way they take up the current issues and discuss amongst the various participants, not only in India, all over the world. I'm very much delighted to know that today's international conference on gender mainstreaming, this topic is currently the main issue throughout the world. But this gender mainstreaming has evolved into many kind of social, economical, cultural, and religious dangerous byproduct. Though gender mainstreaming more into equality between women and men, and as the overarching principle of this gender mainstreaming, that should be taken into consideration in all decisions in each phase of our socio-economic, socio-religious, socio-education, and in socio-globalization process by all the actors involved. And who are those actors? And these actors, none other than we human beings. And why, since 20th century and now in 21st century, why we are talking that gender equality? If we go back to earlier days of human evolution, we may not find such inequality. So I will just highlight that why we did not have in 17th, 18th century may have been, but it was a very minor. But as science innovation has accelerated, and we thought science and innovation will help resolve our socio-economic, socio-religious problem. But unfortunately, the science and innovation has created more gender inequality than ever. So various countries in the world has actually come up with lots of policies, procedures on gender mainstreaming. Just now, MC said in Nairobi, the international conference, the question is that why we have to do this? Why we are doing this? That's because we love to talk only. We don't act. We have a lot of policies, but unfortunately not in practice. But why we are not implementing? That's because of our ego, of our prestige, of our greediness towards a materialistic wealth and position. Now, if this position, if we can, the world situation now, if you look at or read any kind of media, be it social, be it print media, be it broadcasting, TV and radio, you will find full of discrimination amongst men and women. And this discrimination has developed into racial discrimination. Now, all types of policies and procedures are there, but unfortunately, nothing has been achieved. Rather, it has evolved into a dangerous social phenomena. Now, how do we resolve this social phenomena? That's the challenge. The resolving of social phenomena is nothing but how we can handle these socio-ethical phenomena as well. Now, if we go into the next, and we will see that socio-ethical phenomena, or what I call socio-ethical science. So in the socio-ethical science is nothing but various people will talk about religious, various talk about philosophy. Now, if we go back to 17th, 18th century, our society used to be monitored, used to be regulated. The current 21st century is regulated by government policies. But 17th, 18th century or even 19th century, our society used to be regulated by ethics and religion. So the policies and procedures of current centuries is nothing but rules, regulation, but implementation has not been done properly. But previous cases, previous centuries, our society has been regulated by socio-ethical science, and ethics now has come into a downgrade. So what we need to do, that if we really want to come out of the so-called gender mainstreaming, the only way, our policies must be balanced between ethics and science. Now, what is happening? The policies and procedures more onto social rules and regulations, more either science. Now, I would like to share with you, mostly all Indian subcontinent, or rather, most Hindus would read the religious scripture Bhagavad Gita, the holy scriptures. Now, the holy scriptures, Gita, is to me is a perfect book of policies and procedures of gender mainstreaming. But the problem is that throughout the world, the policymakers will come out the policies and procedures which often come out of our ancestors' policies. And our ancestral policies are nothing but the Bhagavad Gita. For the Hindus, for the Christian is Bible. For the Muslims, the Quran. So these are the major religions. The book has been treated like, oh, this is a religious book. I read and keep it nicely in my home museum. The policymakers or the people like educators to us that should be involved, that how these religious scriptures or maybe whatever the book you call, how these scriptures principles can be implemented into gender mainstreaming. Let me quote very specific slokas of Gita. The chapter 7, verse 7, what it says, Matah parataram na anna kinchat asti dhananjaya mai sarvam idam protam sutra mani gahe evo. What does it mean? That means the translation of there is no other cause or outcome of this universe except me. This is what Lord Krishna is saying, that there is no other cause or outcome of this universe except me, just like the jewels of a necklace are strung in a thread. The whole universe is inextricably existing in me. So what does it mean? That the religious scriptures are telling that all are part of the same supreme essence. Be it men, be it women, we all are connected with that particular supreme almighty. Just now at the beginning, we had a fantastic chanting. And this is nothing that you Those are women, I as a man, both of us are linked with supreme essence. We all are created from the same source of Him and all dissolve in the same supreme soul. He is the origin of all and He is the last destination of all. All are in Him and there can be nothing which is separated from Him and are superior than Him. He is the beginning and He is the end. He is the life or existence and He is the end of all. What a wonderful sloka many centuries ago have been practiced. Now, if our policy makers put this kind of education into practice from our day one education until continue to working, not like simply we have studied in class 1 standard enough, but we need to implement this kind of fantastic socio-ethical rules and regulations into our policies, and we will find we don't have to have conference because it will become our like daily behavior, that there will be no discrimination between men and women. And if we can continue to teach these essence from Bhagavad Gita, it's just not because of religious we have to read morning, evening, but whole day we are practicing something. So my recommendation to these conference participants that we look at these so-called religious scriptures or ethical scriptures or philosophical books, how we can extract such kind of sentences and put it into our policies. And then when we implement policies, we human beings tend to follow such policies very strongly because it is written in our religious book. It is not written by any prime minister, it is not written by any president. But if we say, hey, Lord Krishna had said it, this kind of sloka during his time, this is nothing but we all are one. Ultimately, you know, I know that we all have to leave this world. And when you leave this world, you may be living in a fantastic materialistic wealth. You may have plenty of things, but as you know, I know very well, nothing is going to go with us. Definitely. If anybody can tell me, yes, they are carrying something, then please go ahead, practice this so-called discrimination, prejudice, and so forth. So with this, we all have to leave this world, my friends. So before leaving this world, Swami Vivekananda puts it very clearly, let's leave a mark by doing a great work, and great work like create policies and procedures which will be implementing such philosophical, ethical, religious slokas into our daily life so that we do not fall into trap any kind of gender inequality, gender discrimination, or racial discrimination. And you see what is happening in the US now. It is nothing but expression of gender inequality. And it has become a huge mess. We at Lincoln University College, as a we try our best in Malaysia that how these socio-ethical slokas can be put into practice instead of saying that this is a religious sloka. No, we say that this is a philosophy and we must adapt such philosophy in our daily operations. So I hope this conference participants and delegates will incorporate into their faith-based books what are the preachings that how we can implement into your faith-based societies that we do not have such gender inequality. With this, I thank you, the organizers and the participants, to take interest such a wonderful conference theme. And thank you once again. May God continue to bless all of us so that we can live in peace and continue to work for the humanity. Thank you and God bless.
Thank you so much, sir, for being here with us this morning and guiding us so well on the topic that we have chosen for these 2 days. Policies are in place, you mentioned, but they need implementation in true sense, we agree. Power, prestige, and materialistic wealth are the great hindrance in taking gender mainstreaming at the forefront. True that. You've also so nicely woven the teachings of Gita and guided us towards ethical domains. Religious scriptures tell us that humans are connected with Supreme Almighty, and we all are the same. Too good a thought to begin with and follow all through our lives. Thank you so much for motivating us to have a just society. Thank you, sir. We have our guest of honor today, and this one is a celebrity chef, a culinary expert, a food consultant, and a cooking show host, Miss Rakhi Vaswani. She's a Tantemari and Le Cordon Bleu trained chef. She's not only a celebrity chef and a TV host on various channels, but is also an entrepreneur, an author, and is also called as Desi Nigella. Known to be extremely fond of and passionate about teaching. Chef Rakhi is the founder of Panda Studio and Academy. The Academy is the first center in India to be accredited by the Confederation of Tourism and Hospitality in London and UK certified diploma courses in culinary as well as bakery. Is the first international boutique culinary in bakery school to bring in 2 UK accreditations. 2 years ago, she has opened doors to her Indian fusion restaurant called Not So Desi in Indore that goes by the tagline of Desi Khana with Deshi Drama. She is also the editor of the BBC Good Food magazine, and the list goes on. She believes in getting inspired to inspire further by learning and acquiring unlimited knowledge wherever she can, wherever she goes. She might have had her share of adversity, I'm sure, but she has come out victorious. These achievements and the experiences that she shares with us today, I'm sure will enable us to take inspiration and guide us to move ahead with full enthusiasm. Most welcome, Ms. Rakhi Vaswani. Over to you.
Hi, good morning. Good morning, everyone. Thank you so much, first of all, ladies. I'm going to start introducing myself and reading a little, few words that I've written about this whole event that I've just been, connected with, and I'm so happy to be on this platform. So here goes: gender equality in kitchens, which is a fact or a fiction. First of all, hello, good morning, ladies and gentlemen. I'm Chef Rakhi Vaswani, and I would like to start by acknowledging the esteemed panel present here today: Dr. Balani, Dr. Bomik, and Mr. Iyer. I'm honored to be part of this event, and here with doctors and activists who are really making a difference to this great cause. Here's a little bit of an introduction to who I am. I am a sole proprietor of Palette Culinary Academy, which is one of the UK accredited center. It's a boutique international culinary and bakery school. And this is something I love with a lot of passion. Is something, it's my baby that I've given birth to, apart from the other humans I have given birth to. um, so yes, I am aware there are a lot of titles here, but I like to believe that women are the best jugglers. And I believe all young women listening today, or even the men, because obviously it's everyone who makes a difference together, would wholeheartedly agree with me. From a very young age, we as women were expected to don multiple hats. I believe we were doing it so swimmingly. We are the best daughters, best wives, best mothers, and so on and so forth. However, the way in which this is done now in this day and age has changed really drastically. So I might add, being the best daughter now means getting an education, definitely, and making something of your life. Very different from what I was trained to do, definitely. So when I was young, it meant like definitely knowing all your household chores, being great at your academics, doing everything with perfection. And I personally never had such issues, but growing up, the training was very different. We were taught to think differently. There were not many streams of education that we were allowed to choose from. There were just the basics. I remember growing up, I knew that I had to, pick up any of those. Complete my graduation, and what I was looking forward to, going on to, grooming myself, getting ready for that family which I had to build, be a great wife, be a great mother, and play all those roles. Uh, Profession was something very far off as a thought, especially in our Sindhi households back then. I'm not complaining. I'm absolutely not complaining. I'm really happy. It worked out beautifully for me because honestly, for me, um, it was a very different generation. But having said that, I found someone who genuinely understood what I wanted to do in life with. At a very young age, as a child, I knew that I loved cooking. It was a passion. I loved eating good food and I loved cooking it for people. So at that point of time, I realized there's something I need to do in this industry. I did go to the catering institute, picked up a form, but I was so scared I never even shared it with my mother because I thought she wouldn't understand because the streams are business, commerce, arts, and science. So I took out this leap of faith and tried safely, and she didn't understand. Not a misunderstanding, it was the atmosphere. But again, she really did her best to, train me. And I feel all those trainings of, grooming yourself and playing those many hats as a young child, it actually taught me to be an amazing teacher. It taught me to actually, get my skills on point in my industry right now. So all that grooming from the kitchen was very important. Of course, I went international training, and then the grooming is very different, but I just feel that was really very important as well, and I don't want to negate that fact. So I feel whatever we become is what we've, as they say, your upbringing is really important. So I feel that was a part of my growing up, my journey. So coming back to my speech, this was a little more natural added. Today, if I ask my daughter to go into the kitchen and cook a family dinner, she's going to gawk at me and say, like, excuse me. I mean, she would go into her room and say, like, no, I'm not doing this. Do I understand the generations have changed? For me, it worked out really well. But my life was just like a cookie cutter, as you can say, because I'm a chef and I would say that. I fell in love, got married young, had my children, had a lovely family who would help me in every possible point. Yes, I did everything a homemaker was doing. But I knew that I had a passion, a deep inside passion, which was burning. And the person who let me live that dream was my husband. So, as they say, a way through a man's heart is through the stomach. For me, that was it. I knew that this can grow into a career. And another very famous saying, as they say, behind every successful man, there is a woman. I would say it's the other way around for me. So, my husband and my family actually have been very, very supportive. I would say, including my mother in law as well, being a woman. And for me to start my career at a later age, it's a very collective effort, which all of these people have, helped me to, bring my passion into a formal career. So, literally, I found my age at the age of 35, going into formal training, because I did conduct classes. I was running culinary schools back home from the very mom and pop way at my house, but that was it. I was neglecting my children, and I felt like, okay, I want to be a soccer mom, and I gave up my whole career of culinary at a very young age, because the children were there, the family were there, and I just gave it all up. And little did I know that I would be going back into it. So, coming back to my story, I fulfilled all these roles, and suddenly I felt I had to do a lot more. That's when I decided it was time to find my passion again in life. This was my second lease of life, and God has been very, very kind. And I felt I want to just learn, learn, and learn. There was this fire burning inside, because I felt like, okay, I've done my career. I stopped my career to be a homemaker, to be a great mother. And now I'm getting a second opportunity to really take it to the next level. This time around, it didn't have to be a mom and pop operation, it had to be professional. So that's when it happened. I decided. And probably, yes, everyone knows it's about cooking. My husband pushed me to pursue my career. He saw that spark. He knew that whenever I was in the kitchen, I was like a lantern or a fire burning inside me. And it was not only the gas that was burning, it was this fire inside. My kids were grown up. They were very profound teens who pushed me and told me, "You can do this, mom. I know you can do this." And I wouldn't have been here for my family. I'm eternally grateful. And not everyone is as lucky. So at the age of 35, I picked up. I went to London. I went to Paris. I went to Thailand. I went to Dubai. I went all over the world to train myself at international culinary schools. To every year I'd put a finger, and my husband knew that, okay, it's not only two children who are to be educated, it's the third child who needs to be educated. So I believe my teacher always told me, the more you share, the more you learn. So for me, being a chef was not only being a chef, it was about me being a teacher. Because growing up, I learned very informally. And at that point of time, I really felt that, I won't put all the cards out on the table. It's very different to be a chef in a kitchen, and it's very different to be a teacher. So I knew that I didn't want to be a chef per se, just to, start up a restaurant or a cafe. For me, it was the teaching profession which was calling out to me, because I felt that this is what I am in this life here for. This is the reason of my existence, and I need to take this torch ahead. And that's when I'm so happy where I am today. And that's when we started Palette Culinary Studio. We started from a small garage, then we moved on to an academy, and we bought an international accreditations, because all over the world, you have a culinary or a bakery career which can start at any age, no gender, no age bias, and you could be from any strata. You could be a financier, you could be a director, you could be a homemaker, you could be a retired general. But in India, we didn't have those opportunities. We only had the hotel management or a hospitality industry to go to. Now, someone who's at 35 can't do a degree program. We all know that. So that's when I felt that I need to bring in the international accreditations. And we brought in the UK accreditations, which is CTH, Confederation of Tourism and Hospitality. And Gordon Ramsay apparently is supposed to be the brand ambassador of it for a long time. And then we bought in City and Guilds. So we're very boutique. And now we have the space. where again, there's no discrimination. We have people of all age group, coming in and pursuing their career to become a culinary chef or a bakery patissier. And for me, again, all those who can't pursue it at the age of 18, I feel age is cannot also be a barrier. So since we're talking about barriers, my barrier was also the age. So I feel that's something we should and that you can start a new career at any age as well. And I've proven that. So yeah, the boys should work and become men. The girls should stay at home and have children to become women. I think we need to change this a little bit. Yeah. I mean, I'm playing all the roles. I go home, I feed my family, I make them amazing food, I run the whole show, I do television, I attend events, I teach, I train, I train minds. So I am playing all those roles, and and I like to be looking glamorous as well. So I play that role as well. So yes, we are wearing all those hats, and beautifully, as I say. So yeah, not so I believe equal opportunity is only achieved if we break this stereotype, not like the discrimination stops there though. It trickles into the workplace like a virus trickled out of a lab to become a global pandemic, just like that. I personally have faced discrimination even in my industry. As they say, men are considered the best chef, and I don't understand why that quote. Why can't we change that quote? Isn't it true that all these men have actually learned from their moms and grandmoms? Every chef you pick up an article, you'd say, oh, I love my grandmom's this recipe and I love my mom's this recipe. So aren't the women the best chefs there then? Yeah, but I'm not going to oppose this and fight. I think that is what we want to talk about. uh, I have faced a lot of criticism, have been denied a lot of posts and jobs because I'm a woman. Even when I started the Culinary Academy, the first question asked was, oh, but you don't have a restaurant. So it's not only being a man or a woman, it's being a woman first, and then trying to choose a different path, trying to be a teacher in the industry, which is all about hot kitchens and cold kitchens, right? So I had to break that norm, and there were many opportunities which were denied to me because I was doing something different. But I feel all women face that, whichever the strata, whichever the industry you are in, and we need to definitely go to the root of it. And as my predecessors have said so many wonderful things, and there are many other speakers following in, coming up with those policies and those changes. I mean, I'm definitely not the one to quote there, but really happy that this change is happening among us. Yes, education is very, very important, and that's where we need to understand the importance of education above everything else, a teacher. So I love teaching, shaping the minds of young individuals. I think that a kitchen should be a place for both men and women. Hopefully that's changed a lot, and we see a lot of women in our industry. And it's amazing. It's a very pleasing space to be in. It's great that at this point of time we are having such opportunities to talk out, to say things, to share our experiences. And that's the whole change that's happened, which is so great. You can see the smile on my face. When I was approached on a Sunday morning by Dr. Balani, I immediately said yes, because I was so happy that there's this gentleman here at that, coming from that generation, is actually making that change, and he's so happy about it. He's making that effort. So I couldn't say no. And he was cooking for his family, and I was shopping for my family. So we're all playing so many of these roles. And it's such a lovely, morning on Monday where you have this great group of people, and we are talking about that change. We're not only talking, actually, guys, we've actually made that change. For me, I feel we've already made that change. The fact that we've acknowledged it, we've got so many people from all over the world spending those 2 days together. That's the change. I'm sure we are definitely affecting so many minds. But yes.
Yes, Miss Rakhi, we agree with each word that you have said. And of course, it is definitely going to make a difference to each one of us. And surely we are going to follow your advice of pursuing our dreams irrespective of our age. Thank you so much for that thought process that you've planted this morning today in all of us.
Thank you. I'd just like to conclude with a parting note. And I'd like to say that, there shouldn't be, there shouldn't be any, my students who go out in the industry, whether there's a male or a female, I don't want them to be addressed as Miss. I want them just to be addressed as chefs. If they are chefs or teachers, that's the title they want. I'd love to say a parting quote. I'd like to quote Albert Einstein. The woman who follows the crowd will usually go no further than the crowd. The woman who walks alone.
Please unmute
Please
her.
unmute.
It was, I think someone muted me by, okay, sorry about that. I'm going to give that quote again. This is the final quote from me, and I'd like to the woman who walks alone is likely to find herself in places no one has ever been before. And at this point, I'd like to say that since we've made that change, we are all equal, and we're so happy to be here. And again, like, it's my family, my husband, in fact, who's been my pillar of support, to make me this successful. So I'm not going to complain. I'm a happy person, happy soul, and I'm so happy to be on this platform. Thank you, and cheers and kudos to all of you. Dr. Balani, Neelu, thank you for being such a gracious host. Over to you guys.
Thank you so much, Rakhi. Over to you, Lubna. Dr. Lubna, please unmute yourself.
Let me say this before I introduce you to the guest of honor. It takes courage to show up and become who you really are. With this quote, I would like to welcome Mr. Harish Padma Vishwanathan Iyer, a columnist, an Indian equal rights activist, and a renowned blogger. Mr. Harish engages in advocacy for a number of causes that includes promoting the rights of the lesbian, gay, bisexual, and transgender community, children, women, animals, and survivors of child sexual abuse. Mr. Harish Iyer is one of the most vocal proponents and is responsible to move to the Indian Supreme Court to decriminalization of homosexuality in India. He has written articles and letters on the subject and appeared on top national television's news, highlights the plight of the LGBT community in India in wake of the decision. Let me mention a few. Mr. Harish Iyer was featured on Indian movie star Amir Khan's talk show Satyamev Jayate in an episode on the issue of child sexual abuse. Prior to Satyamev Jayate, he was seen in the panel of NDTV's popular talk show We the People, which was anchored by Barkha Dutt. Mr. Harish Iyer has spoken many times at TEDx and has been acknowledged. Mr. Iyer has achieved many awards and accolades in his life. In 2016, Indian government-owned firm honored him Bharat Award for his contribution in the field of women's empowerment. The award was handed over by the Petroleum Minister of India, Dharmendra Pradhan. Mr. Iyer is one of the 10 individuals to be awarded the Zindagi Life Awards for his working in creating awareness on child sexual abuse. I welcome an influential personality, Mr. Iyer, for this international conference. Over to Mr. Harish Iyer.
My name is Harish and my gender pronouns are he or she. It's important to mention the gender pronoun because just because I look a certain way, my gender should not be presumed to be the same thing. So, and as a practice, I wish that all of us in all our forums start doing this. If you look at my name now, you will suddenly see a mention of my gender pronouns. Uh, so, when we look at gender, whenever we speak of gender, we look at gender always in the binary. We look at gender in the binary of male or female. When we speak about gender empowerment, we often speak about women empowerment, right? Gender empowerment is not just women empowerment. Gender empowerment, people need to understand, is also men empowerment. Because when there is equality and when there is equity before equality, it helps everybody. It helps men as well to have an equal support system, an equal earning member, an equal person at home who, when it's a heterosexual relationship, an equal earning member at home, an equal partner where a man is also able to understand the femininity that exists within the man, the maternal feelings that exist within a man. If a woman gives the man the opportunity to be who he really is, because I often feel that we often try to typecast women in the box of being a very good mother. I think men can be good mothers too. Men can be good fathers too, and women can be good fathers too, right? Just that we sometimes stereotype and we put people in these boxes all the time, and we confine them to those boxes by defining a stereotypical image that we have in our minds. So I think gender empowerment is men empowerment as well. So men have no reason to be threatened by women's empowerment because that's really going to lead to the empowerment of men as well. Okay. And is going to, I believe vulnerability is the biggest strength. And that strength is what is hidden in men, and they aren't allowed to be vulnerable at many points of their lives. And the more vulnerable they become, the more stronger they become too, right? And it's very I think it's incredibly weak of men to just show brute physical strength but not be vulnerable deep within. And that vulnerability is strength. And I think gender equality, when we are speaking about the binary, or we are speaking about all gender, gender is not binary. I mean, I could be male, female, I could be trans man, I could be trans woman. I could, sex is not binary, I could be male, female, or intersex. So, first of all, we need to first look at gender not in the lens of binary, and understand that gender also means men. Okay. A trigger warning before I even begin starting what I'm going to speak. This could be a little traumatic for people who are listening to this. So use your own discretion. If you find it traumatic, please turn off, please go off. I will take no offense. And you could come back and watch this later. Uh, I am a survivor of child sexual abuse. I was raped at the age of 7. I was raped from the age of 7 till the age of 18. And I started speaking at a time when it was very difficult for people to speak, because I'm 41 right now. I spoke up when I was 18, which simply means that I spoke up 23 years before. And at that time, I was subjected to bullying because people thought that, oh, if I was speaking about child sexual abuse, speaking about being raped by a man, probably I would have enjoyed it too. People assumed that I was gay because I was raped by a man. Just as people assume about women, probably if she was quiet for so many years, probably she was enjoying it. The woman could be heterosexual, right? She doesn't turn lesbian because of that. She could be heterosexual. You can't turn lesbian, you can't turn gay. You just are lesbian or you're gay. She could have been heterosexual. She could have enjoyed sex with other men, but just because this one man actually did something to her, you tend to assume that she would have enjoyed it because she was quiet for so many years. That's what happens in cases of domestic violence, and that's what happened with me. I was raped for a period of 11 years. I was raped from the age of 7 to 11 by my uncle, and then his friends gang raped me many times till the age of 18. So I was brought up. My sense of self was very skewed. It was challenging. I couldn't understand what was happening to me for the longest time. So I experienced subjugation, humiliation at the lowest lows of my life. So yes, uh, from that area of subjugation and vulnerability that I experienced, I also gained my strength. Because when you're pushed to your lowest lows, when you're pushed to your lowest lows and you can't go any lower further, that's when you have only one option, and the option is to spring up or to perish. So I sprung up at that time, and the reason why you see me talk with resilience, with no fear or favor of what people are going to think of me or what people are going to offer me, because are they going to kind of hero worship me because I said something? It doesn't hold true, because I've seen those lows. And that's why it's important that we understand that when we are speaking about gender, we are speaking about empowering all genders. That doesn't mean that we make this about patriarchy and make this about, because I am a victim of patriarchy as well. This doesn't really mean that this has to go into root of men's rights activists, which is a humbug. Okay, that I think gender activism means all genders. When we speak about feminism, I'm a feminist because I stand for all genders. I stand for equality of all genders. And men also feature over there. So when you have men's rights activists trying to make an anti feminism brigade, I quite don't understand that, because feminism also stands for men. Feminism doesn't only stand for women, right? It allows for the vulnerability in men. It allows the space for men, and it's not called manism, and it's called feminism simply because women are historically subjugated, not because of anything else. So I think what we need to understand when we are speaking about gender is expanding the scope within the ambit of gender and looking at gender from a lens of all genders, and how actually patriarchy, when I look at a patriarchal person, whether the person is a man, woman, or a transgender, women can be patriarchal as well, and men could be hardcore feminists as well. So when I look at patriarchy, I see more. I don't look at them as just perpetrators. Of course, they are perpetrators of a thought. I also look at them as victims who have been inducted and indoctrinated into a system which expects them to behave in a certain way, which also molds and shapes every aspect of theirs in future, where they are able to think at only one lens. My ex partner was telling me a while ago that he was that he met somebody, and that person was speaking of very bravely about him beating his wife. But when he spoke to him and he delved deep into it, I he got to know that he was also beaten by his father. That's not an excuse, right? But this was something that was inducted, and he saw his mother being beaten by his father. So you get indoctrinated into the whole thing. So now you're looking at him as an adult who's beating the child, who's beating his wife. Look at him as the child who saw his mother getting beaten up and that being normalized. And probably his children, thank God, I wish that people don't have children, because it's a threat to the environment, and people should rather adopt. But if people do choose to have children, I think that I think that the same pattern will continue with those children as well, right? So I think what is important is that we break the cycle of abuse, and we look at gender in a larger context of not just the binary of male and female. Somebody could be male, somebody could be female, somebody could be transgender, somebody, I'm gender fluid. I go with both pronouns, he or she. I have a penis, I don't have a vagina, but what I have as an organ shouldn't determine what I wish to, the gender that I am. I could be any gender that I am. What's important is that I'm the truest version of who I am. I think each one of us who is attending this and watching this on YouTube is an activist, because anyone who lives their life truly and unabashedly is an activist. That is the truest form of activism. And anyone who has been oppressed and who has been suppressed and is using that energy to do something good is an activist too. So we need to channelize all our activism together and to fight for gender rights, because gender is not just female, gender is also female. So that's something that we need to understand, and that's a lesson that we need to take, because if there is somebody who needs feminism the most, it's the men, because they need to understand that there is beauty in being vulnerable, there is beauty in breaking down, because only when you break down will you be able to assimilate yourself and make yourself into what you really want to be. So, with that, and also would like to apologize that I couldn't come. I had an emergency at home. I was supposed to start the conversation, but I'm coming the last because I had an emergency at home and I had to go to the hospital. So I'm really, really sorry for taking time.
Thank you, Harish, for joining us in spite of the emergency that you had and gracing the occasion today. Thank you so much for that. Being a true person is important. You rightly mentioned that. Gender, male or female, is just a way of expression, a binary way of expression. I feel grateful to all the guests this morning for sharing their time and sharing their perspectives with us, motivating us with personal examples from their own lives, teaching us lessons, giving us viewpoints, and showing us the various paths treaded by different people. Harish, especially you, patriarchy has done a lot to this world, and there are victims everywhere. I hope we are able to find some insights and deal with the theme of gender mainstreaming of our 2 days conference in a more holistic way. I thank you, Sir Bhomik, Ms. Rakhi, Harish. Thank you for sharing your thoughts with us this morning. I move further with our program and I welcome the other speakers, the theme speakers. First of all, a very warm welcome to you, Professor Vibhuti Patel. She'll be speaking to us this morning on gender budgeting and policy perspectives for mainstreaming gender. Let me tell you a little about Professor Vibhuti Patel. We know she is a very, very well-known figure, but still a little bit of formal introduction to all those who would get reminded of that. Professor Vibhuti Patel was professor at Advanced Center for Women's Studies, School of Development Studies, Tata Institute of Social Sciences from 2017 till 2020, after her superannuation from SNDT Women's University, Mumbai. She is a PhD in economics from University of Mumbai. She was awarded visiting fellowship to the London School of Economics and Political Science from Association of Commonwealth Universities UK in the year 1992-93. She has co-authored and authored more than 12 books. She's edited and co-edited 9 books and contributed over 100 papers as chapters in various books edited by others. She has also authored and co-authored 34 research monographs and reports. Her articles are published in national and international peer-reviewed journals very often. She is actively involved in Indian Association for Women's Studies. A very, very warm welcome to you, ma'am. And I request you to please share your thoughts on the topic, gender mainstreaming. Vibhuti, ma'am, you'll have to unmute yourself.
Okay. So very good morning to one and all. First of all, I would like to express my heartfelt thanks to Dr. Bhagwan Balani and also co-organizer Dr. Amaya Bhaumik, today's chief guest, and co-organizer Women's Studies Center of Calicut University, Dr. Lalita Anand, Professor Maudi Kuruvilda, and Dr. Mini Sukumaran, who is also our General Secretary of Indian Association of Women's Studies, with which I have a long association, and my co-panelist Dr. Madhvi Venkateshwaran, Chef Rakhi Vaswani, and Dr. Swana Rasool from Johannesburg, and Dr. Jomo from Botswana. My previous four speakers have made my task easy by setting the context for gender mainstreaming. So all the conceptual issues have been covered by them very, very effectively. And well, now we come to the very technical aspect of budgeting, because I know so many people. I have been doing the training for gender budgeting since 1994, when the India granted 33% reservation to women in the Panchayati Raj institutions. And I know the fear that people have of the budgeting. Budget as an exercise. So I think it's very important, and that because any gender commitments that are made, they should be translated into financial commitment. And the state has a very important role in gender budgeting. So I think gender budgeting is a tool for gender mainstreaming. It's a very, very important tool, because in a market economy, unless any of the promises and proclamations are backed by money, we just can't achieve anything. So I think first of important thing is the analysis of budget from the gender perspective, as it was elicited by Dr. Bhagwan and Dr. Ameya and Dr. Harish, and also gave, so he deconstructed so many gender terms. And second stage is that of reformulation of the budgetary policies. Wherever there was a gender blindness or gender insensitivity or gender neutrality, you make it gender responsive. And the third aspect is that of bringing the systematic analysis and also the budgetary process, coming up with the important provisions which would result into empowerment of all genders. As Harish said, there is not only man or women, but the transgender community, which is completely socially ostracized and excluded, historically excluded from the process of development. That is very important. The inclusion of them is also equally important. So crucial contribution of the budget, as we know, most of the popular discourse which is there in the newspapers and after every budget, the kind of discussions that take place, that budget represents the financial plan, and it is the most significant tool for instrument for bringing the macro policies to change the macro policies, and also coming up with a more equitable distribution of the national resources. And it is a policy making tool of the government to translate the objectives of the government, whether it is a 5 trillion economy or for gender sustainable growth, to achieve those goals, we need to have a socio-economic development. Now, another very important dimension in the budget is that of a classification system that budget provides in terms of expenditure, how to raise the revenue and how to spend the taxpayers' money. Policy formulations and performance analysis are very important. Allocating resources efficiently to each and every sector, whether it's agrarian sector, industrial sector, or service sector. It's ensuring compliance with budgetary resources which are approved by all the legislator elected representatives have to pass the budget estimates. And also how day-to-day administration, once the money is parked in the ministry and the departments, how it is used, that is very important. So gender budget, when we talk about it, it is not separate budget, but rather the dissection, using the gender analysis, using the gender lens to understand whether the programs, policies, measures, allocation, financial allocation is going to create enabling influence or disabling influence. So use of public economics to reduce gender gaps in 5 important areas. As Harish said, that there has been historical neglect of women in important areas like education, health, food security, safety, employment, and skills. That is very important. Second one is reprioritization in the public spending, and also transparency and accountability of the revenue generation. The way you are generating revenue, it can't be from casino, or it can't be from sex trade, or it can't be from drug trafficking, okay? It has to be from a clean, from the actual production in the economy, in the industrial sector, agrarian sector, service sector, technological development. And public expenditure in that also there has to be transparency. There should be lifting the veil of statistical invisibility of the unpaid care economy. What Chef Raki told us, the kind of work, cooking, cleaning, caring, which is not unpaid. United Nations says that women constitute 1/2 of world's population. They do 2/3 of world's work, but what they get in return is 1/10 of world's income, and women own only 1% of world's property. So this is the skewed this thing where women are at the bottom of the pyramid because their vital contribution is not recognized. It is unpaid care work, and I think now with gender responsive budgeting, care economy is getting proper recognition. Two aspects: equality aspect and efficiency dimension, because wherever there is equality, where everyone's creative energy is used for national development, the economy also becomes efficient. All the World Economic Forum has shown that the economies where work participation of women is very high, their contribution to the economy is very high, then those economies are thriving. They prosper very fast, and that's why it's very important. Gender responsive budgeting to enhance the constructive participation in the development process is very important. And it also, gender responsive budget is concerned with transforming the macro policies to ensure 4 types of justices: gender justice, social justice, distributive justice, and economic justice. And that is the promise in every country has made in 2000, in the year 2000, in Millennium Development Goal and also Sustainable Development Goal. So it is very important that to translate these gender commitments into financial commitments, we need to analyze the situation of men, women, transgender, girls, boys in all these important areas of education, nutrition, health, employment, skill, safety, transport, and sports. And currently, all the world economies, they are concentrating on public health because of the coronavirus pandemic. 191 countries have been affected. Assessing the gender responsiveness of the policies that we have adopted, assessing the budgetary allocation, whether it is adequate or insufficient, monitoring the spending, whether there is a corruption or leakage or faulty spending, or on the service delivery, whether it is appropriate or not, and assessing the outcome. If you are investing in education, like Brazil, Argentina, they came up with the conditional cash transfer. India adopted right to education. After that, what has been the scenario? More induction of children in the school, more retention of children in the school, not dropping out, children not dropping out, because that is also backed with the midday meal scheme. So that is very important. In last 10 months, because of the coronavirus imposed lockdown, we have seen the wheels of history have been turned in a backward direction. What we achieved in 150 years of social reform movement and the freedom movement, I think some of the things, like so many children are out of school, nearly 1 crore girl, 10 million girls have been out of school because of the online education and the digital divide. Now, important concerns in gender responsive budgeting, and especially, is the 3 types of services: protective and welfare services for the women in difficult circumstances, women survivor of violence. Currently, the United Nations has declared violence against women, gender-based violence, as a shadow pandemic. So it is a devastating impact it has. So support services, one-stop crisis center. Second aspect is social services, where the budgetary provision is for education, health, daycare center for working people's children. I am not talking only working women's children, but working parents' children, father or mother. Women working, women's hostel, fuel, fodder, water, housing, sanitation, nutrition. And third one is the regulatory services, the state commissions, women's cell within the ministry, or the criminal justice system, more awareness and more support services for women survivor of violence. And making people aware of all the programs. If the programs are there and not enough publicity is done, then also the fund remains unutilized. Currently, 84 countries are doing gender responsive budgeting exercise. It all started with Australia in 1984, and we see that several countries in Africa, Latin America, Asia, even European Union is implementing gender budgeting. The strategy for gender budgeting, the way the gender economists are focusing on One, increasing budgetary allocation for the existing schemes, improving quality for resource input, risk distribution of the budget allocations if it is not proving so showing any result, changing the type and quality of goods and services, and also changing the policy outcomes. So this is the flow chart which shows that the global call for gender equality, as Dr. Baumik said, that it was in Nairobi conference in 1985 that the forward-looking approach was accepted. Nairobi forward-looking strategy was adopted in 1985. There was a shift from women to gender, focusing on the power relationship. And then several countries, they took up these concerns at a national level. And the local initiative started with the women's election in the elected representative in the local self-government bodies in several African nations and India also. It happened in 1994. And gender sensitivity training started in the 90s, and violence against women was given a special concern, where the United Nations declared that from 25th November to 10th December every year, there should be focus on various to addressing the violence and support services for the survivors. Livelihood and support services became very important, and now what we see as a result, the concern, the focus on gender empowerment, and also broadening the potential and social capacity building, and people's greater participation of people in the decision making about budget. In India, this exercise became very legitimate when the Towards Equality report was debated in 1974. All over the world, 1975 was declared by the United Nations as the International Women's Year, where equality, development, and peace were the main motto. 165 member countries, they submitted their status report, and we saw that the separate focus on women in development became a name of the game. In several countries, they mainstream women in development approach in their economic policies, and a lot of awareness started happening. So what we see, the gender and budget analysis focuses on all the neglected area, as Harish said, that how the transgender community, it gets totally excluded from the development process. Currently in India, there are only 2 states, Kerala and Tamil Nadu, which have tried to mainstream the concerns of transgender community. Now, at one level, we have a gender stereotype, which all my previous 4 speakers spoke, that we treat man as a breadwinner. But the burden of the day-to-day life and the survival struggle, which is shouldered by women, is very, very high under extremely adverse circumstances of low literacy, lower wages, and paid care work, high mortality rate, gender-based violence, and economic participation, economic opportunity, political empowerment, education attainment, health and well-being. These are the 5 important areas which are historically neglected, and there are institutionalized hegemony which would not allow any change to happen. So the gap between formal equality, most of the countries now, democracies have a formal equality guaranteed in the constitution, but to make it a substantive equality, we need to focus on the most marginalized. Gender responsive budgeting is an exercise made to verify from the actual schemes and allocations to what extent it has translated into changing the reality. That means your goal is gender equality. How do you, first of all, you have to target poverty alleviation, ensure good governance, ensure accountability and transparency, and increase the economic efficiency by including all socially excluded sections of the society into the productive economic activity, and for which you need equity. So equity is very, very important. Creating a level playing field through gender budgeting, through progressive legislations, to important rules and regulations and rules of governance is very important. So for translation of any policy statement, budgetary allocations becomes extremely important, and it has to be constantly monitored. It has to be a participatory process. So the gender responsive budgeting becomes a link which projects the needs and demands of the people, aspirations of the people. It amplifies the voices of the people, that what do they need in their area, whether they need schools or whether they need universities, whether they need road, whether they need social infrastructure like health intervention, or a very good quality physical infrastructure. And these needs and demands, they are taken to the policymakers and to the government. And so it's a two-way communication. So it is very important to have this kind of a democratic exchanges. And we have also seen over last 30 years, the gender economists have also done the area studies, country reports, where we have seen that wherever there is a budgetary allocation for women is done in a sensitive way, gender responsive way, we have seen immediate indicators of empowerment. So many African countries, especially Somalia, we have seen, or Rwanda, in last 20 years, where women decision makers, 65% of the parliamentarians are women, and how they have used taxpayers' money in a very, very judicious way. And we have also seen that wherever there has been reduction in the social sector budget, it has reduced opportunities for women, especially privatization of higher education has taken away, robbed women of good quality professional education. So even when you have a macro policies of devaluation or inflation, erosion of public distribution system, agrarian crisis, unemployment, it also creates tremendous burden on women. Here comes the role, like this is the case study of India, where for the first 5-year plan, immediately after India's independence, Central Social Welfare Board was formed at 4 crore rupees, 40 million rupees were allocated. And now we have like recent budget, which has more than 72,000 crore rupees for gender responsive budgeting. So gender budgeting involves review of public expenditure profile, conducting beneficiary incidence analysis, recommending the change in the operational guidelines. If the guidelines are wrong, or the guidelines are insensitive to the local reality, we need to change it, and ensuring women's active participation, or those who have been excluded, their active participation into the budget making exercise. So you can have 100% directed to gender concerns, you can have a 30% directed to women, you can have a gender neutral scheme which also benefits, for example, employment guarantee scheme for the poverty groups. So many women, because among the poverty pyramid also, women are at the bottom of the pyramid. Several countries have also adopted women empowerment policy with special focus on housing and health and livelihood and education. But still there are so many unresolved issues. For example, women-headed households, their program. So many government schemes which keep women just as an honorary, they give honorarium, they don't regularize their work. So the question of addressing discrimination in intra-household discrimination in the family, how to address that. And gender economists have also demanded that there should be separate listing of women-specific items in the budget, and there should no diversion. Whatever is women's component within the budget cannot be cannot be diverted. And also there should be composite programs addressing women and girls under flagship, like important areas like education, health, rural development. And there should be restriction on the reappropriation for this purpose. So to engender the budgets, we need to intervene right from the local level to the national, and also macroeconomic policies where the fiscal expansion, more of a social sector intervention is demanded. Political decentralization, many Asian developing countries have adopted political decentralization. They have also introduced quota, 30% quota, 40%. European Union has a 40% quota for women parliamentarian. But along with that, there should also be financial decentralization. So the question of a women entrepreneur, the difficulty which Dr. Chef Ame Rakhi told us, that how difficult it becomes, how the kind of biases you face even in the enterprise, even in the industrial sector, where women are not even considered creditworthy and no banks and financial institutions come forward. So state has to play a very important role in changing the mindset of investors, and also coming up sits at the example of best practices. So it is very important that, and all the elected representatives also need to be sensitized on gender budgeting, because gender budgeting is an extremely important tool for creating equity and equality. It is a affirmative action for improvement of gender relations through reduction in gender gap in the development process. Throughout the world, we have seen in the 21st century, there are so many experiments made. For example, bottom-up budget. Professor Devki Jain, she started this exercise, sitting with the people, doing the micro planning, need assessment, identifying the practical gender needs and strategic gender needs, and taking the budget forward to the district level. It goes to the state level. Green budget, there are in the desert areas, in the low rain areas, or in a dry areas, the communities have also used green budgeting, that how to address deforestation, how to stop sandstorms. And we have also seen gender budgeting. Elderly people, senior citizens organization, they demand gender the audit from the senior citizens point of view. Disability groups have also demanded a budget audit from their interest. Child rights organizations have also demanded gender, they are now child budget. And we have seen that women's organizations world over have also started the Right to Pee campaign, where public facilities like women's toilets are not there in the public places. In Mumbai and in several other places in India, in the urban centers, women are young women, they are demanding more public toilets in the public places. So formation of gender budget cells within any institution, any government department, by in the corporate, both state and non-state actors, they need to do it. Very important. Currently, faced with coronavirus, we have seen that wherever women decision makers, the presidents and prime ministers were women in the country, their response to coronavirus was far more effective and humane. In India also, we have seen Kerala has, the health minister of Kerala, she has given an example where the World Health Organization has also declared it as a best practice how to deal with the pandemic with human face. So there is a strong call by the gender economists that we need to finance for gender equality, and the gender equality framework needs to be adopted by each and every government and the non-government bodies. Paradigm, and there needs to be paradigm shift. Instead of talking about how to bring women in development, let us talk about women-led development. Last 10 months have taught us that wherever there was a women-led development, there was a gender justice, there was economic justice, there was a care and concern, there was a sensitivity to the care economy. So the local and global implications of pro-poor and pro-women budgeting, third gender budgeting, alternative macro scenarios which emerging out of alternative budgets, and showing the interlinkages between gender sensitive budgeting and women empowerment is very important exercise with the gender economists do. There is an international organization of feminist economists which doesn't use its knowledge of economics for getting consultancy in dollars and euros, but they are using their knowledge of economics to strengthen the local communities and locally through gender responsive budgeting. Serious examination of budget calls for greater transparency at the level of international economic to the local processes of empowerment. So we need to address the World Bank and IMF also not to impose any policy that would create tremendous human misery, and they should not force any national. And I think recently we have seen that even Miss Gopinath, Dr. Gopinath, who is the chief economic advisor of IMF, has also recommended to all nation states to do the fiscal expansion and support the people who have lost their livelihood and job with the income support program. So I think we are seeing changes even in the global institutions, and there is a need to provide training and capacity building workshops for decision makers in government structures at global and local level, parliamentarians, and also the media, because you know that immediately after budget, all the newspapers, magazines, and blogs are talking about budget. So sensitivity is very important. Here there are some very good films made by UN Women. All of them are available in a public domain. They are there, and they are one click away. And these are showing the best practices and the case studies of different countries: Malaysia, Brazil, India, Timor-Leste, Morocco, Indonesia, Philippines, all these case studies of gender responsive budgeting and what kind of empowerment it resulted in the important areas. And these are some of the very important articles. They are also available in the public domain. Feminist Policy Collective and in India, and also UN Women is providing all intellectual resources, information, data, everything is in public domain. Anyone can access it. And please, I express my heartfelt thanks to the organizers for giving me this opportunity, especially the Women's Studies Center, Calicut University, which recommended my name, Dr. Mauri Kuruvilla, Dr. Vinny Sukumaran, and the director, Madam Laila Anand. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, ma'am. Thank you for focusing on the concepts of gender responsive budgeting, which is not a separate budget for women. We appreciate your contribution about the 5-step approach to gender responsive budgeting to translate gender commitments into financial commitments. We would like to thank you for throwing light upon the impact of GRB, the gender responsive budgeting in 84 countries that has adopted this sort of budgeting. We also like to say that you have thrown light upon the budget analysis that can help to focus on these neglected aspects, as it provides women with the vital information regarding the content and focus of existing government policies, and also the gender gap in 5 critical areas, that is economic participation, economic opportunity, political empowerment, educational attainment, health and well-being, and the historical neglect and institutionalized hegemony, the gap between formal equality and substantiate equality. We would like to also thank you for giving us insight into the gender responsive budgeting goal and also sharing with us the impact of this budget. We also would like to thank you for giving us the resources that you have shared with us, and we will definitely show this to our students, and I'm sure the other participants would carry this and would definitely explore it. Thank you so much, and I go on to the next session. I welcome my next speaker, Dr. Madhvi Venkateshan, and she'll be talking on the topic gender and economy, value of work. Madam, I welcome you to this conference. A warm welcome from the Bombay Teachers Training College and the collaborators of this international conference. Dr. Madhvi Venkateshan is an academic economist and environmental activist. She earned her doctorate from Vanderbilt University and has a master's in sustainability and environmental management from Howard University and a master's in environmental law and policy from Vermont Law School. Dr. Madhvi's academic interest includes the integration of sustainability into the economic curriculum. She has been active in promoting education and stakeholder engagement to incorporate ethics into the existing economic framework, and her written work has focused on these topics as a catalyst to promoting sustainability. Dr. Madhvi has also contributed to the literature on the relationship between gender, culture, sustainability, and economics, addressing the relationship between economic systems and cultural governance. Dr. Madhvi is an advisor to Asian African Association for Women, Gender and Sexuality and the book review editor for the Journal of International Women's Studies. In the book titled The Value of Work, she has highlighted so much on the concept of value is based on the measurement of its market worth. Markets, however, are not efficient and in fact include bias. Further, prices and income reflect institutionalized exploitation and prevailing norms. In this discussion, Madhvi Venkateshan, an economist, argues that we need to address the shortcomings of market values in order to understand the true value of work. Income is a proxy for the attainment of well-being, but in only focusing on market values to determine value. We have reduced real well-being in terms of the quality of life. Dr. Venkateshan argues for needed change in the measurement of value. I welcome you, ma'am, for this international conference. Over to you, madam.
Good morning. Good morning. It's very early in the morning where I am. It is 1 o'clock in the morning, and I'm very happy to be able to speak with you with regard to a few points that I believe really need to be addressed. They aren't necessarily in the mainstream of economic thought, unfortunately, because unfortunately we still operate under the prevailing perception that the market economy is the default or evolved state of our economic systems. The market economy as we know it today is one that has been imposed upon us, principally not even for 100 years. Basically, since the 1940s with the IMF and the World Bank, the promotion of the GDP, first starting off as the iteration of the gross national product, entered into all developing countries, and in many ways helped us, because I am an Indian by birth, feel a sense of inherent insecurity, inferiority, and marginalized status compared to so-called Western countries that had higher GDPs. At that time, of course, GDP becomes the indicator that we actually used in the 1990s. The reason why I'm starting off with this point in our discussion is, first of all, in order to be able to understand why we are where we are, we need to understand how the measurement of well-being has affected how we got to where we are. Of course, there are always inherent issues in terms of society and how we look at each other, and perhaps inherent insecurities and discriminatory behaviors. But in many ways, economics has helped institutionalize that. And in so being, it can also be the method by which we actually get out of that. And that's where I talk about sustainability in my work. At any juncture in human history, perhaps this is the most, a time where it's most apparent that we need to adopt a better set of measures, a better set of understandings as to what we wish to be as a human species. The market mechanism has failed us in so many different ways. It is highlighted directly in looking at gender issues. So I'm going to walk through a few different items with you today. And I'm also going to discuss a couple of things as well. But the one aspect that I do want to highlight upfront is this perception when we think of gender equity and gender equality, that it needs to come at the cost of somebody else's equity or equality. Inherent in the discussion, there is a certain amount of agitation or anger to the fact that we live in a prevailing patriarchal system. But the reality is every one of us in some way, shape, or form has actually helped empower that patriarchal system by taking on the role that society has given us as women. And many of us, for its most practical value, is in the way in which we try to appear in society, because that is an appearance that has been molded in many, many ways by a patriarchal system. So I think in recognizing first how we have actually been part of this system, can we start to recognize that what we argue about against it may actually start with our own understanding of ourselves. So that's just an aside, but I would like to get back to that in a moment, especially when we talk about how women's systems or gender-based systems that are biased towards women in leadership somehow are superior. I have a fundamental issue with that, and I hope to bring that to bear in our discussion. So gender mainstreaming by definition is policymaking that basically takes into consideration the items that separate us based on identifiable gender. I'm going to leave it like that because we have already had discussion with regard to the fluidity of gender and that it is a non-binary aspect of human existence. It is a complex issue, gender in general, because we have systems of power that have already been in place. It's also made complex because when hostility occurs, the goal is to somehow supplant what exists currently and let the pendulum swing the complete opposite direction. The reason why I say this is an issue is when we look at quota systems, which essentially are what we put in place when we looked at giving women, even as this previous speaker brought up with Rwanda, women greater participation rates. Part of it's because of regulatory action that actually promotes and instills that, not necessarily based on quality, competence, or effectiveness, but based on the idea that they want to create statistics that show that women are in leadership positions. And that's a really important thing to think about. Just because a woman is physically present doesn't necessarily mean that her mentality and her thought process or how she evaluates the world around us is going to be different from the prevailing male or patriarchal system that she's now a part of. Systems have cultures of their own. So if you're in a system that has been male dominated, your ability to succeed in that system is also going to be based on your ability to be a part of that male domination. So it means in some way, shape, or form, without even maybe realizing it, or by directly realizing it, you adopt those aspects of that institution that will effectively enhance your success within it. So you may actually lose sight of your gender diversity because of the very need for you to become more congruous with the prevailing culture. So that's something I think we need to take into consideration when we talk about gender, and we talk about gender as a means of creating a better society. It's the diversity that is embedded in gender that can potentially give us different perspectives. But to the extent that institutionalization eliminates that diversity, we may not see much change just because you have greater gender representation. So that's what I mean when I say it's complex, because we need to also think first, are we looking at inclusivity, which is just the physical act of having a woman present, or are we looking at diversity with are we looking at diversity, which is a physical act of having a woman present, or are we looking at inclusivity, which is the idea of listening to the voices that are in the room? Inclusivity should come before diversity. And for that simple reason, when we think about women and women empowerment, we need to think about fundamentally, how are we going to change the perceptions of people so that we actually enable this inclusivity? So there are two things I'd like to just bring up here. And then I actually have slides, but they're mainly quotes. So I'm going to share those with you in just a moment. The market economy is inherently unfair. And it's unfair because of one simple reason. Whoever has the power to exploit and whoever has the need to actually be partaking in it, as opposed to the other, the relatively stronger need to partake in the market system, will be exploited. So that means that prices are not indicative of the true value of anything. And this going back to my opening comment with regard to our economic measurement or economic tool of measurement, GDP, which is basically a roll-up of all the prices that we pay. It's a roll-up of the final consumption, investment, government, and net imports in a country, or exports, I should say, depending upon what type of country you are. When we look at that from that perspective, we see that we value the market as a default for valuing the work that a person does. And in stretching this issue and saying that somehow we need to fight for equal opportunity in jobs, as opposed to saying we need to fight for equal opportunity based on the value of what we all individually provide to an economy, it changes the argument, because we continue to use income or a quantitative measure as the proxy for human value, even though we understand that that proxy inherently is flawed because the market is flawed. What I am advocating for more than any other time, as I mentioned when I first started talking, is that this is the juncture at which we can actually start to say to ourselves, instead of continuing after this flawed mechanism, this flawed value of human life, flawed value of work and productivity, which undervalues developing countries because of not taking into consideration informal markets and unpaid work, which unfortunately tend to be a lot larger in amount than in developed countries, and also takes away from women the very value that they provide in providing work that is unpaid. Why don't we start to think about how we change people in terms of their appreciation for work, period? Why can't we do a more permanent fix rather than constantly chasing after a financial metric as though somehow it is the basis by which we should be valued? And I say this because every aspect of looking at equality, if you look at education, if you look at equity in terms of occupational distribution, they all are assuming that the system that we live in today can continue to grow and maintain itself indefinitely. And the reality is it cannot. And that reality is actually being spoken about more and more often. So if we were actually able to start educating our public to actually value one another for intrinsic purposes of what we bring to the table, we actually would be in a position to change the future for other people that come after us. So a simple analogy I will bring to you is if somebody asked you what part of your body you'd be willing to sacrifice so you don't need that much because it's basically like it does unpaid work and has therefore no value to you, you probably say your pinky toe, your small toe on your foot. But if somebody chops that off, your body will feel that pain endlessly because your body still recognizes that it's there. It's very much the same way of us thinking only of the value in terms of dollars and cents. If you look at the intrinsic value of things that a person brings to the table, it changes the discussion completely. Who is to say that a mother does not enjoy being with her child? That somehow only if she has a caregiver and she goes out to the workforce and makes an income to pay the caregiver that her life has greater value, that somehow she's living to greater potential. In a system where you only base somebody based on income, you discount perhaps some of the most important elements with regard to the future of human life, which is how we raise our children, how we interact with each other, how we look at and value each other with humanity and morality. So these are the aspects that I would say we need to be very cautious of when we look at this whole concept of value. Value is something beyond dollars and cents, and dollars and cents are just principally just that, a proxy that are based only on the relative strength of whoever is making the decision. So that would be one thing, if anything you would take away from my comments today, I hope you will think about and think about deeply to yourselves with regard to how our minds have been skewed to only value income and value people based on the income they make. There have been many people who have commented on this, including President Jimmy Carter in 1979, who warned us as we were one generation into the GDP indicator that we have become a nation of consumers in the United States. And all we really valued is how much we had and have, not the communities that we come from and not our families and not our friends. He was predicting a situation that we're in today, a situation that we really have an opportunity to change. It may seem far-fetched to some to think, how can we live outside this market? But I just want to remind you, this market as we know it today has existed for less than 100 years. We did not always measure countries based on their aggregate production capabilities, and we certainly didn't always have a means of evaluating people only by their income. There was a time when we had value for our families in a different kind of way just because of what they were to us. And the bonds that we were able to create helped and maintained a sense of security that today has been replaced by the fear of lack of income. So just a couple other things just to add on here. There was a discussion a couple of times in the previous speakers that talked about equality versus equity, but I really want to make sure that that concept is understood. Oftentimes the statistic that's pulled out is how much a woman makes relative to a man, and that somehow this needs to be fixed so that women are actually making the same amount as a man, a relative wage. The reason why women make less than a man typically is because of equitable distribution of occupations. So in other words, women don't have access to the same level of occupations for a variety of reasons, from cultural norms to perhaps just lack of opportunity from income sources, parents not sending their daughters because of early marital ages that come out of basic cultural norms as well. But those are where we see the differences in income capability. But again, it was one thing for someone to want an occupation. It is another thing for someone to be forced into the occupation because that's the only way that they have value. So I would very much like again, to think about that. Equity is really important to the extent that we want a world where people are able to achieve their goals, their desires. But it shouldn't be based purely on the idea that income is the only barometer by which we measure value, because we will not be taking our societies in the right direction, and we will not be fixing this gender-based problem in a way that actually has a pure, permanent and positive value change. So I'm just going to finally just to make a couple other comments and then leave you with my quote. Actually, I get a lot of pushback because I also run an organization, a nonprofit. And I also have not always been an academic economist. I worked in the corporate sector for a long time. I was an actual financial services person who who actually took care of the earnings for a few major corporations, including AIG, before I re-entered academics. The one thing that I learned during those periods was, first of all, the power of economics, because we have created the world that we live in today, and it's basically economic theory. So if you take any class, I think the one class you should definitely take is an economic theory class, to at least understand the path that has been laid before you. But the other part that I think is really important to understand is that change can happen. It's just very difficult. And it's very difficult because of two reasons, one of them directly related to our economic system. Our economic system has actually promoted and perpetuated a sense of individualization, individuality, which actually separates us from community thinking. And that's related to the fact that you can sell more product when each person has to buy their own. And that actually has permeated into our norms of behavior in many, many ways. So engaging on issues related to the changes that need to be made can be very difficult because we have actually created through our own economic system a very selfish, self-centered society looking out for its own individual self-gratification. It's very difficult to coalesce people based on that. So that is the one challenge that we have. And that is a challenge that will continue to persist. But the value that I can give to you out of my discussion about that challenge is that no challenge has ever been overcome because millions of people necessarily started the process. Almost every challenge that humanity has faced has been based on a few people being dedicated to being that change. And in their dedication to being that change and their continual push to make that change has occurred. But the thing that has separated that from a regulatory top-down approach is that when people understand why changes need to be made, when that small group of people go around and talk to other people, explain to other people in the language that they understand, that aligns them to the greater good, the greater common good, the greater common goal, you actually have changed society first and then allowed regulation to just be a codification of a change that's already existing. And that is something I hope that you will think about. People who are in elected office are in elected office to represent constituencies that they mirror. It's only when you change the constituency's belief pattern that the people in elected office will mirror it. Very rarely, unfortunately, have we found leaders in any country that have been capable of being the leadership that we really need to guide us to a place that we cannot see. So we need to concentrate, if we're thinking about gender, we're thinking about value, we're thinking about changing the market system, we're thinking about building community, we're thinking about respect, we're thinking about universal sense of morality towards one another. We need to think about how we're going to do that on what we call a grassroots basis. How are we going to engage with all the different stakeholders in our community to make them aligned to this greater good? So with that, I'm just going to leave with two quotes for you. And the first one is actually from a book that's just come out. And this is just an excerpt from it, but I think it's very beautiful in the sense that it ties directly to what I'm saying here. Change doesn't happen because of a singular hero. It isn't elegant and it isn't linear. It comes through the planting of many seeds, only a small number of which will sprout. You will never know where you are in the process, but you can always know that you contribute to that greater body of work. And that's really, really important to remember, that we never know where we are, but it is actually being part of the process that is what drives our lives. For those of us that are wed to the convictions that things need to be different. But one other quote that I want to share with you too, because it's also very important and very important for any kind of change agent or activist to understand. It is difficult to get a man to understand something when his salary depends on his not understanding it. So our economic system has become so embedded that people are not necessarily able to pull themselves apart from it, to be able to assess even how they think outside of thinking within a market-based economy. I'm asking you today to start to think perhaps about a different type of economy, one where we don't have to proxy our well-being with dollars and cents, but we actually actively pursue our well-being by our relationships and the things that are meaningful to us. And I have so much more to say, but I actually did not want to put more slides up because I know that that it's early for you, even earlier for me. I do hope that some of you, if you are interested in anything I have noted, that you will reach out and communicate with me. I am a faculty member at Northeastern University in Boston, Massachusetts. I'm very willing and happy to speak to anyone on these issues. I have a couple of books coming out this year, but I did have one last year come out on SDG number 8, decent work and economic growth. And that highlights to some extent some of the points that I've just brought up with you today. So thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Madhvi Venkatesar, where you shared your perspectives, how market economy is imposed on us. You made us understand why we are where we are. Madam also urged the need to adopt a better set of measures to relook at the market economy in relation to gender issues. She highlighted how human systems are biased. It's that diversity that makes the fabric of society. Are we looking at inclusivity or are we looking at diversity? Was the question to ponder upon. A very thought-provoking question that we have become a generation of consumerism rather than values being given importance. Thank you, ma'am, for reiterating that change can happen. And yes, we can be the seeds that sprout. Thank you, ma'am. Thank you for sharing your perspectives with us. Established gender research and analysis enables us to examine and challenge social norms around what it means to be a woman or man in society and to pursue justice and equality for all, which should be the fundamental facets of development. Women in development approach did not address men and other gender. Therefore, it is now referred to as gender and development, our next theme, which focuses on a development process that transforms gender relations. A more comprehensive approach to analysis and design of development interventions that meets the needs of all genders. To throw more light on what is gender and development, we could not have asked for a better expert than Professor Shahana Rasool. Dr. Shahana Rasool is a Rhodes Scholar who obtained a master's and doctorate from the University of Oxford, Department of Social Policy. She also has DPhil Social Work from Oxford. She is currently an associate professor and former head of the social work department at the University of Johannesburg, lecturing in research, social issues, and community development. Prior to coming to University of Johannesburg, she lectured at the University of Witwatersrand. She is the Vice President, Association for Schools of Social Work in Africa and Africa representative on International Association of Schools of Social Work. An activist, researcher, trainer, and academic in the field of gender for many years, Madam focuses on gender-based violence. Professor Sahana has taken a keen interest in social transformation, which began as an anti-apartheid activist in South Africa and continued through her work in the NGO sectors, both in South Africa and Australia. Her research has looked at the socio-cultural influences of help seeking as well as responses from formal and informal resources to abused women. She has international partnerships in the Caribbean, Egypt, Germany, USA, and UK. Professor Shahana is also the chair of the Southern African Journal of Social Work and Social Development. She consults in the area of gender, leadership, and transformation. We couldn't have really a better expert than Professor Shahana. Over to you, madam, to share your perspectives on the theme gender and development. Ma'am, please unmute.
Sanibanani, and a very good morning to all of you. Kunjani, I hope you're all well today. Thanks so much for the introduction, Dr. Raju. I my screen. I wonder if you can, okay, there we go. You've allowed me to. Technicalities out of the way. Give me a moment, please. Okay, can you see my screen?
Yes, ma'am. Do it on the slideshow mode, please.
If I do it there, then I can't move back and forth. So unfortunately,
Okay.
I have to stay in this. So you're going to have to just
All
bear with
right.
me. Okay. So again, thank you so much for that very detailed introduction. I think I'm just a sister in the path of this work, and I really appreciate Dr. Madhavi's presentation this morning, and really the important things that she shared about intrinsic value of people. And I really hope that that will embed even my presentation right now. I think that was a really valuable point, and I think it was really important. So I really appreciate that. Thank you. And thank you also to Nilu for your persistence in ensuring that these partnerships happen. And I really appreciate it. And I think, as Raju said, I'm here in various capacities representing a few different organizations, which she mentioned, so I'm not going to mention them again. However, I would like to briefly mention the newly established Asian African Association for Women, Gender and Sexuality, because I think this is a really important platform for all of us. And I hope that many of us who are here will think about joining us in creating this community that Dr. Madhavi was talking about. And I think that it would really be important if you have a look at the website, because the Asian African Association for Women, Gender and Sexuality offers a platform to support, promote and share inter, multi and transdisciplinary research about women, gender and sexuality across the regions of Asia and Africa. And we are committed to building bridges to connect academic scholarship, civil society organizations and policymakers in government to harness feminist and gender-based scholarship to build South-to-South interactions and development. So please look at the website and also look at how you can join us. And I think it will take all of us to create this community. As Dr. Madhavi spoke about, we can only create this community to create this change, because I think really that we are the beginning of the change. And I think just keeping in mind everything that Dr. Madhavi spoke about in terms of really the intrinsic value of each person in relation to whatever I'm talking about today, because I am drawing on the kind of stats that she's talking about. But critically to do this, she was really talking about the African concept of Ubuntu, and the African concept of Ubuntu, which is really means that we are because of others. And so none of this work can be done without each other. So going into my presentation, gender equality is a contested and complex phenomenon that is difficult to define and measure, which makes the process of understanding its impact on social development complicated. As Dr. Raju said, in the 1990s, a change of focus occurred with the move from concerns with women's vulnerabilities to gender. Whilst women are still extremely vulnerable when looking at many dimensions of development, as I will show you throughout this paper, there are areas in which interventions need to address gender and the relational aspects between men and women that contribute to the persistence of gender development challenges globally. Development has very specific dimensions, or very many dimensions, not just specific dimensions. And these dimensions include race, class, disability, age, location. And these are just some of the dimensions that impact on the nature, depth, and persistence of poverty and development. So in this paper, I will use certain social development goals to illustrate a number of core themes that are important to consider in the process of addressing gender inequality. So the first one is location. Location, location, location. I'm sure you've heard this before. Isn't Camps Bay in South Africa one of the most beautiful places in the world? It's the picture on the slide on the top left. I'm sure that there are such beautiful places in your parts of the world as well. The only thing is that for me as a South African, every time I drive past Camps Bay and Clifton, Cape Town, I see these houses that cost billions of rands. And I'm amazed that people can actually afford to buy them in a country like South Africa. I get angry by the inequality because a couple of kilometers from this very beach, there are places like Crossroads and Kairicha, which are the pictures on the right, where people are struggling to have one meal a day. And as I said earlier, I'm sure that you can think of similar comparisons in your context. And this highlights for me that location is still a critical dimension in development. It is a key determinant of whether you will be able to power a laptop or phone, whether you will study by candlelight, and whether you will have access to transport and services like hospitals and police stations, and whether you will have to walk miles to collect water. So for example, if you live in a rural area. If we start to look at inequality at a global level, this picture provides a comparison of Africa and Europe with regards to energy. It emphasizes the starkness of inequality at a global level for me. As you can see, Africa is energy poor compared to Europe. 7 out of 10 people in sub-Saharan Africa have no electricity. Think about it. What would your life be like without energy? And what can energy do for you? You can run a business with energy. You can run your computer, internet, TV, computers. You can use tractors to grow more food, run refrigerators, light up schools, and have lights to do homework. So energy is important. And research has shown, for example, that students in Sudan were able to improve their pass rates from 57 to 97% just after 1 year with electric lights. So whilst access to energy is more of an issue for low-income countries and for people in rural areas, as pointed out earlier, this is variable depending on location, age, race, caste, ethnicity, and other social dimensions. So gender inequality remains a global challenge, despite arguments that gender inequality or gender equality or addressing gender equality is imperative for the overall development agenda in terms of economic growth, stability, enhanced productivity, and its cumulative effects on other dimensions of wealth, of welfare, education, health, and family. Despite these arguments, progress and commitment to addressing gender inequality has been variable and inconsistent, since gender discrimination is embedded deep in the culture and structure of social systems. And I think this is what Dr. Madhu was also talking about earlier. And for me, this is particularly accentuated in the area of care. Care is one of the most challenging aspects of gender inequality to tackle. And why is care one of the most difficult areas to tackle? Because it requires addressing social cultural norms and structures that sustain traditional gender roles and stereotypes that still plague all 3 areas of social life. Those 3 areas are production, reproduction, and community. These 3 areas have been referred to as the triple burden of care, which remains at the heart of addressing gender inequality. I will briefly consider each of these areas to raise some areas of progress, as well as areas of inequality that persist, which underlie the challenges of addressing the underlying structures and systems that sustain and perpetuate gender inequality. So first, in the reproductive sphere, women contribute to economies by taking a large chunk of responsibility for direct care, such as the bearing and caring of children, as well as the caring of the elderly and sick in nuclear and extended families, as well as indirect care, such as cooking, cleaning, or fetching water. It is important to note that doing these tasks vary in physical effort and time intensity depending on location, socioeconomic status, as well as age, marital status, and number of children. But data from as recent as 2019 shows that women are responsible for 75% of unpaid care and domestic work globally in our homes and communities. So this is pretty much like yesterday, recent information. Women are still responsible for 75% of unpaid care work. If you look at the slide, brown is for women and green is for Black. So while some men are taking a little bit of responsibility in these domains, the data is stark. This graph shows that almost every part of the world, women spend almost double the amount of time on care work than men, with some exceptions. See the blue line, and that shows the gender gap. So this remains, so women still remain primarily responsible for care, unpaid care work. In an international study covering 19 countries, .500 focus groups were conducted with men and women to consider their everyday experiences of gender. It emerged that people predominantly view women's tasks as largely being associated with family care and home production, and men's with income generation and decision-making. Razavi concurs, I quote, that caregiving is so easily naturalized, even by women themselves, as something that women do, and hence not an issue that could be rendered the subject of public contestation and policymaking, unquote. And this often impacts on the politicization of care. Hence, most public policy approaches to care have not radicalized the economic or social systems that by and large sustain gender roles, particularly in the private sphere. Second, in the area of production, which I think Dr. Madhavi may have covered a bit of, women participate in formal and informal economies and are involved in various roles in government, politics, and civil society organizations. In the area of production, similar to increased workforce participation, MDG 3, I know it's old, but it was important in terms of development, sought to increase women's participation in the public domain. MDG 3 urged for greater political representation of women in national government decision-making structures, since they still remained underrepresented and subjects of policy decisions without direct representation worldwide. Although women's political participation has increased marginally, overall it still remains a challenge, particularly in certain African regions. Moreover, measuring women's political engagement is currently limited and needs to consider other levels of government, since there is evidence that women's representation at local level has positive impacts on both the lives of men and women. A case in point is India, where increased political quotas for women at local level has led to the increased provision of public goods, both male and female preferred ones, such as water and sanitation, which is female preferred, and male preferred is irrigation and schools, and it reduced corruption. However, the unintended consequence of MDG 3 is that it doesn't account for the implication of increasing women's work in the productive sphere on women's continued role in the other two spheres, that is the reproductive and community, because as you saw, they're still doing 75% of the unpaid caring work. Further, MDG 3 did not indelegate women's participation in the workforce. So while one of the most important gains worldwide has been women's increased participation to between 39 and 40% in the global workforce. And this has remained similar from 2014 to 2019. Sorry. So this has remained similar between this time frame. Yet women's employment rate still remains 25% less than men's, as is evidenced in this graph. So women in red and men's participation in black. Okay, so this is women and men's participation worldwide. So even though it's important to measure this increased labor force participation of women, this indicator is deceiving, since it does not account for the quality, security, and wage gaps in employment or for occupational segregation. For example, I quote, women in Northern Africa hold less than 1 in 5 paid jobs in the non-agricultural sector. The proportion of women in paid employment outside the agricultural sector has only increased 6% in 15 years. And globally, women earn 16% less in average hourly wages. And overall, women still remain in insecure employment, are overrepresented in low-paid jobs, have less access to social protection, and we've seen this come out a lot now with COVID, and they are paid on average less than men for work of equal value. Women are also still underrepresented in leadership positions, such as CEOs of large corporations, since only 33, that's 6.6% of women were CEOs of Fortune 500 companies in 2019. Again, this is yesterday. So although now women are participating in the workforce much more than historically, the nature of this participation needs to be interrogated for its impact on well-being, since women still continue to carry the larger responsibility for care in the home environment. Moreover, the issues of access to care remains contentious, since half of all economically active women work informally, which means that they have no entitlement to paternity leave or to workplace-based care services, which are differentially available even those who work, depending on the sector, area, and the strength of the trade unions in where they work. Further, issues of care are complicated by class, since middle and upper class women may have additional access to care through the services of poor women, while still carrying some responsibilities themselves. So the matter of care is contentious and plagued by inequalities in the social system. Class in the South African context, class, for example, and in the South African context, race. In India, maybe the caste system is a dimension. In other contexts, ethnicity may be a dimension. So that's the area of production. Next, in the area of community care. Please let me know when I have 10 minutes left.
Yes, ma'am, sure.
Yes, ma'am.
Thank you. So community care is the third area. Women contribute to economies with their labor through their community care role. They are involved in caring for the sick, disabled, elderly, and children outside of the family in the broader community through their work in childcare facilities, old age homes, orphanages, as nurses, teachers, social workers, and other relatively poorly paid professions. Even professionalized and institutionalized care work by women receives inadequate pay and are plagued by poor working conditions. Women also engage in community care as volunteers, which is unpaid, especially in times of dire need, such as wars, natural disasters, or other emergency situations, such as currently in the pandemic. We know that women have been taking a huge responsibility for care in communities. So for example, HIV and AIDS has contributed to also the increasing the caring responsibility of women in communities because of the associated health burdens. Women's work in communities is exacerbated in economically disadvantaged locations, such as rural areas, where infrastructure that is important to reduce women's unpaid domestic work is lacking, such as energy, water, and sanitation. And this is often exacerbated by climate change. This is also the case in situations where access to social services that can contribute to reduce the unpaid caregiving, such as health and primary education services, are inadequate. Hence, in the area of community, women's caregiving roles continue to be undervalued and in many cases, poorly paid or unpaid. So just to end about the issue of care, whilst it is imperative that women take increasing responsibility in the public sphere as national and international priority, this has become an add-on rather than an instead of or a shared responsibility, and thus has subsequent implications for women's health and well-being. Razavi argues that the increasing demands on women's time is particularly evident in low-income households where there are young children and women are responsible for both childcare and income generations. These households also have inadequate access to both public and private care services. So the economic benefits and contributions made by women's caregiving and nurturing roles are undervalued or unvalued. And there is a need to look at enhancing the contributions of male family members in the private sphere. If we look at SDG Goal 5.4.
Ma'am, you have 10 minutes.
Thank you. It aims to recognize and value unpaid care and domestic work through the provision of public services, infrastructure, and social protection policies, and the promotion of shared responsibility within the household and the family as nationally appropriate. Whilst this goal attempts to address the gap I mentioned above by including a goal on care, the indicators and measurements for this goal could profoundly impact inequality if this goal begins to account for the economic value of women's care work as labor in the international economic system. So that economic system Dr. Madhavi was talking about needs to change profoundly. Moreover, if concomitantly with measuring women's role, we begin to measure men's involvement in the private sector and develop indicators and intervention strategies that directly aim to motivate for shared household responsibility, the nature of both the private and public domains would change radically, and this may have profound implications for changed gender roles. Hence, the international goal on care needs to focus not only on the changing role of women, but concomitantly interrogate the role men play in the private sphere to assess the extent to which this is changing and shared. Although the SDGs do mention the promotion of shared responsibility within the household and family, it has the caveat of nationally appropriate. So it provides an escape clause for countries, which is a bit of a problem. So the issue of care needs to be considered in a relational way that not only considers women's role, but considers how to increase men's role in care. Otherwise, the argument of women's triple burden of care continues unabated, with no actions taken to ameliorate the balance of contribution made by women in various spheres of life. So that was the issue of care. There was a couple of other themes that I wanted to talk about, but because of time, I may not be able to go through all of them. The one was about HIV/AIDS and how it talks about the links between age, location, and gender, but I'm going to skip that one, and it's something that I can always send you information on. But what I would like to talk about next is violence against women, because I think this is a really important issue when we're talking about development. So violence against women is a critical factor to consider in the achievement of most of the development goals, since it is an outcome of gender inequality that hampers development overall. The development impacts of violence against women are wide-ranging. It affects women, children, and the functioning of families, and in turn, unhealthy families impacts on communities in the broader society, linking to Ubuntu and what we were talking about earlier. Honoru has argued that with respect to South Asian countries, that, I quote, the human, social, and financial costs of violence against women and girls severely hampered countries' abilities to achieve 6 of the 8 Millennium Development Goals. So if it affected the ability to achieve MDGs, it will probably affect the ability to achieve any of the SDGs as well. And Soltov and Pandey suggest that an important protective factor against violence against women and child marriage for girls is resource control. That is, the ownership of assets, either financial, land, or resources. Yet resource control still remains a challenge for women worldwide. Ownership of resources and access to are critical for challenging gender inequality, since it can act as a protective mechanism against violence and dispossession. It improves women's control over sexuality and reproductive health, and it is key to confronting hunger and poverty through meeting the basic needs of families. There's also extensive research which indicates that when women have control over the household resources, it is more likely to be spent on meeting household needs. Evidence also suggests that increasing women's access to productive assets also contributes to increasing women's voice within the household. Evidenced by family law reforms in Morocco, where when the ownership rights of husbands and wives were equalized over property acquired during marriage, and joint land rights for husbands and wives in Ethiopia, this changed. In fact, interventions in the sphere of resource control show multiple impacts on gender outcomes. Similarly, addressing childcare is really important, because childcare, for example, in Korea, was an effective reform package to address several key policy issues simultaneously: high unemployment, low economic growth, low fertility, and gender equality. So increasing women's resource control is an example of a quick win that has the potential to impact substantially on inequality, violence against women, and has ripple effects on other development issues. There's also an interdependency between women's development and the health and development of children. In many contexts as diverse as Brazil, Pakistan, and Senegal, it has been shown that improving women's health and education has resulted in better outcomes for their children, and education has ripple effects on children's life chances, education, and employment. Someone's mic is on. In effect, educating mothers has a direct correlation with child mortality, as evidenced in Northern and Western Asia, where children of mothers with no education are almost twice as likely to die as children of mothers with primary education. So for children whose mothers have secondary education, the chances of survival more than triple compared to mothers without education. So it is clear that women's empowerment and addressing gender inequality has implications not only for the well-being of women, but children, families, and society as a whole. Therefore, it is imperative to find ways to address deep-seated gender norms that perpetuate inequality. So some of the take-home points that I'd like to, just in summary, for you to take back with you from my presentation are the following. First, gender interacts and intersects with other dimensions of inequality, such as race, class, ethnicity, caste, location, etc., as well as broader development issues such as poverty, crime, violence, health, and climate change. Second, tackling gender requires addressing the relational issues that contribute to preventing development. It may be possible to make progress on some aspects of development by only working with women. However, in other areas, engaging men is necessary if interventions are to be impactful. And this was shown a lot in the HIV work, but I obviously didn't talk to that. Third, doing gender work makes economic sense because of its potential to impact on multiple development issues. And it has enhanced outcomes for families and communities. It is therefore important to find quick wins that transform gender relations and enhance family well-being. Finally and critically, dealing with gender issues are complex since it requires challenging, deeply rooted structural issues that are ingrained the psyche of communities, religious doctrine, economic systems, and cultural practices, as highlighted in the issue of care. Taking account of issues of care in SDGs has the potential to fundamentally and radically transform the way we look at the economy. If adequate consideration is taken of how women enable economies to be sustained and grow through their care work. And then to end, I would like to echo what Madhavi had said, that people, each of us, can create change. We need to think about the sacred economy, a different type of economy. Let us be the change we want to see. You can be the ripple in the pond. I'm not sure if there is time, there's an exercise I could do if we have time. If not, then I can end here. Thank you so much.
Ma'am, we have our lunch break here after 20 minutes. So, and we have one more speaker after you. So we would request.
So there's no time.
Yes, ma'am. We would request you to.
Okay, no problem. Thank you so much. Thank you for giving me the opportunity. All the best.
Thank you, ma'am. Thank you, Dr. Shahana Rasool, for bringing to light a lot of data and statistics through this presentation. You showed us the true picture as it is evident today. The global condition of women, insecurity, less access, poorly paid, underrepresentation, less privileges, access to community services is little. Issues can be interrogated and addressed. Thank you for showing us that side of the coin. Violence against women is another field and is a crucial perspective when we talk about development, which is also what you highlighted in your presentation. Through resource control, rather through increasing women resource control, we can have a few positive impacts in the field of gender mainstreaming. The research quoted by you shows that people are working in this field of gender mainstreaming, and we might be able to achieve what we are aiming for. Truly said and truly ended by you, let us be the change we want to see in the world. So thank you, ma'am, for this thought-provoking address which you've given us this morning, and thank you for being with us. I'll proceed further with our next resource person for this morning. We have Dr. Komotso Jongmin, who's a professional social worker who specializes in youth and community practice. He is also a lecturer, a motivational speaker, author mentor, and a life coach. He is president of ASWA, Association for Schools of Social Work in Africa. He's a community practice and a youth specialist with the University of Botswana. He has a PhD in social work, specializing in youth development. His interest in youth development ranges from youth entrepreneurship, positive youth development, and youth resilience. He's been with the University of Botswana for the past 5 years, where he has taught and supervised students and has published more than 8 articles and 1 academic book. Dr. Jongmin has a book on the history of social work in Botswana, which was published in 2015. Dr. Jongmin has been active in the profession of social work, as he was the president of the Botswana National Association of Social Workers for 4 years. He's also been working in the human rights sector. He is also keen in helping the community, as he has been on the national radio and television and talks about issues of social well-being of his nation. Dr. Jongmin is not only serving the nation, he's also active in the Department of Social Work as seminar committee member, takes over a lot of seminars which are organized under his leadership, and tries to do his best in tackling social issues, and also tries his best to come up with solutions. Thank you for joining us, Dr. Jongmin, this morning. Over to you for your address.
Thank you very much. I don't know what time is it, your side, but our time is still morning. So I'll say good morning to everyone. And thank you for the introduction. I never knew that I have such a long biography, but now I know. I think this is a good opportunity for me to be presenting on this because I've never presented on anything concerning gender issues. I've always presented on youth development, but I've never done anything on issues of gender. So I've moved a bit from my comfort zone, and I think I'll make sense because my presentation is more on Botswana. I did not look at other countries. I've looked more on what is happening in Botswana, and I've termed it ignored pandemic. It's only to stimulate the thinking and interest of the participants of the conference, because there are new names that you might not be familiar with that we are familiar with in this country. Gender-based violence, as we all know, it's a human rights violation in the world. And it does not know the social, economic, and national boundaries. Just 2 weeks back, we had a lawyer who killed the ex-girlfriend, and he killed himself in front of the current boyfriend. And there was an uproar because people thought an educated person like him do such a thing. But it goes to show that gender-based violence does not know social class or economic class and does not even have national boundaries. It is estimated that 1 in 3 women in the world experience physical violence or physical abuse in their lifetime. And in our country, it's a bit higher, where 67% of women have indicated that they have experienced violence in their homes. It's interesting because majority of the time, the violence happens within the family. It is mostly the girl child being abused by the father, by the uncle, then later on by the boyfriend, by the husband. It's mostly within the family set up. In our rape cases, you realize that majority of the rape cases happen within the family. Women are raped by people that they know. So it is something that I think it's more familiar with us. We don't get a case where somebody was raped in the streets. It's usually within those that know her. And gender-based violence, as we all know, it undermines the health, the dignity, the security, and the autonomy of the victim. It takes away the self-worth of a person. And when it is growing, it leaves a lot of people with fear that I might be next. I know in South Africa and Botswana, we are almost the same in terms of issues of gender-based violence. And women in these two countries are always looking behind their backs to always try to make it a point that they are safe. Because even the messaging to women is that don't go alone. You always need to have a male figure to protect you. And that on its own takes the dignity, takes the security and the autonomy of women away from them. And the most beautiful thing is that it is intertwined, or it is within our culture of silence. And we've normalized it to a point where when it happens within the family, we don't say anything. We keep quiet. We need to protect the integrity of the family. If you talk about what happened to you, you are going to be exposing the dirty linen of the family into the public. Last year, as I teach a course called Personal Development, I gave them an assignment on my scars don't define me. That was an assignment. And out of the 150 students, 30 of young females indicated that they were molested when they were still younger. And one man or one male student indicated that he was raped when he was younger. And this said a lot. And out of the 30 who were raped, who were molested at a younger age, only one person reported the case, but the case never went anywhere. So if we have 30 young people who have been raped and did not report, how many young girls are out there who are raped and everything is concealed so that we can protect the family? That is the challenge that we are facing in our country currently when it comes to issues of gender-based violence. And as I present, you realize that I'm more focusing on women, not both genders. It is because it happens more to women than to males. And I deliberately said it's an ignored pandemic because from where I sit and from where what I've read has indicated, the cases are high, but nobody is saying anything about it. It is always by the way when we talk about gender-based violence or when we talk about gender-based issues, they always come by the way, or by the way, there's an issue like this. And then from there, we swiftly move on without seriously interrogating what is happening. That's why I said it's a pandemic, because it is spreading, but we are not really working hard to combat it, because mostly it is within our culture. And within this ignored pandemic, there is something that is called passion killing. I believe that in other countries, you don't have a word like this. In our country, we have a word called passion killing. Later on, I will explain what is passion killing and what we are currently seeing within the scope of passion killing. And gender-based violence in Botswana, as I said, it is intertwined with culture of silence. It is within our culture of modesty. Usually, we don't like to discuss our things. We move on, even though we are psychologically suppressed or depressed. We just move along. We are a peaceful nation. We don't want people to see what is happening inside of us. So we keep everything within. We try to contain everything. This is why research has shown that in Botswana, at least 3% of the population is depressed. And the happy index from the UN has shown that as a country, we are amongst those who are angry. We are an unhappy nation. This is because we suppress everything to protect the integrity of the family, to protect the integrity of the country. So we start from the micro level to protect the family, to the meso level to protect our community, and to the macro level where we are now protecting the nation. So we don't talk about these things. These things are not, these are family things that are not supposed to be discussed outside. So the culture, the religion that says a man is the head of the family, the religion that says a man should be respected. You see, we read it in a way that we don't also read when it goes to say, as the head of the family, your roles are 1, 2, and 3. We concentrate on one aspect that says a woman should respect a man. But there is an aspect that says, as the head of the family, you need to respect your family. And gender inequality, I think Shahan talked a lot more on gender inequality. There is gender inequality. The young girls and young boys are given the equal opportunity to go to school to improve their livelihood. But you realize that equality on its own does really not make a difference. Rather, equity will make a difference because already there is male privilege. So when the young girl comes from school, there is a lot to do, while the boy child, there is clearly nothing to do. So issue of gender inequality is one of the issues that adds a strain into the gender-based violence that we are seeing. Access to control over resources, power, decision-making patterns. These are all the things that we are seeing within the gender-based violence sphere. And when I move slightly into I'm trying to move this, okay. When I move slightly into gender-based violence in Botswana, gender-based violence is the highest level descriptor of women's and men's oppression globally. It ranges from a lot of things. It starts with small things: a slap, suicide, and murder. And we realize that men's oppression in most cases goes unreported. This is another important and interesting aspect. And because of the socialization, they cannot report whatever it is happening to them because they are going to be looked at as weak. So their oppression seems that it is not out there, but it is there. I think it's 44%. Oppression, regardless of its scope and nature, is reported as a universal problem. 67% of women in Botswana experience gender-based violence in their lifetime, as I've already indicated. And for men, it is about 44% violence perpetrated against them. And as I indicated previously, in Botswana, we have what we call passion killing. So I'll go into passion killing. Despite the peace and tolerance being synonymous with Botswana, a series of murders in the name of passion, often referred to as passion killings, have not been reflection of the standard of serenity. As I indicated previously, as a country, we are known to be a country which is peaceful. And we cannot be taking out our dirty linen outside there. But there is a pandemic in this country called passion killing. Passion killing in other countries, they call it femicide. And femicide, it's a form of gender-based violence. And in Botswana, usually males kill their female partners and later on, they commit suicide. As I was giving an example at the beginning, just 2 weeks back, 2 attorneys died out of this passion killing, where this guy killed an ex who parted ways with him 2 years back, but he could not accept the reality that they are no longer together. He looked for a gun, went to where the girl stays, and then killed her, and killed himself in front of the current boyfriend. The trauma that is left with the current boyfriend and those people in the vicinity. This is what is happening. This is what we are grappling with. And last year alone, we had 23 murders and 192 cases that were reported. And we need to understand each and every murder is a lot. But with our population, it's even worse because you are looking at a population of 2 million. If you are going to have 23 women killed in the name of passion, that is a lot. If you look at the numbers of women who were murdered last year, compare them to COVID-19 deaths. By 2020, we had less than 23 deaths from COVID-19. So it means gender-based violence or passion killing is killing more people than COVID-19. So this is why I still believe this is a pandemic that we need to deal with. And the COVID-19 has shown that women and girls are at more risk. Because as I've indicated, the power, the decision-making, the control lies with the males. And having 3 months of lockdown, it meant there was no breather. They had to stay with the people that they are afraid of. And the police reports show that from March the 30th to April the 5th, that is only in 5 days, there were 22 rape cases, 23 cases of defilement, 1 threat to kill in 2 murder cases in only 5 days. And this is a pandemic. If in 5 days we are experiencing such a lot of cases, and mind you, these are reported cases. There are those that were not reported. And majority of the cases, most of the time, are not reported because we are a peaceful nation. We don't want people to know what is happening in our closed doors. So this is a pandemic. And the way it is reported in the media, it always perpetuates the problem because it always gives it a sensation. A woman was killed in Molepolole, and the headline in one of the newspapers said, cheating, beautiful, married Motswana woman busted by boyfriend, shot dead in a movie style. This is a headline in a local newspaper. And there are so many headlines that I wanted to put here, but due to the time that we are given, I thought it would take time. But the way the media is also reporting on issues of gender-based violence, it's in a way that is sensationalizing their titles or their headings. And this gives those who did not even have the thought to start now thinking those who are doing this are their heroes, and later on they want to do it themselves. And I want to believe research has proven that in terms of social learning, that people learn through observation and imitation. And this is what we are dealing with currently. Then in terms of the interventions, last year, 2020, it was very interesting because one member of parliament from the opposition side brought a motion in parliament, in the Botswana parliament, to say we are currently struggling with gender-based violence, with high level of passion killing. We need to do something as legislators of this country. He opted for a commission of inquiry where experts and victims, survivors will come and narrate their stories so that maybe we can come up with interventions that will be helping in the fight against gender-based violence. And on the opposing side, the ruling government said the motion is not urgent and we don't need any commission of inquiry. Rather, we are going to have an interministerial committee to deal with that. And it has been a year without having that committee. So the political will to deal with issues of gender-based violence, it is not there. We cannot have it in the agenda because there is no political will. But we see that we have the narcotic squad, we have the diamond squad, we have the traffic court, we have the livestock court. All these because are important to the current government. But gender-based violence is not important and it cannot be put into the agenda to be urgent. While we are losing more than 50 or 100 women in each and every year, leaving children as orphans, leaving children traumatized. We still have no court on gender-based violence issues. We have the Department of Gender Affairs, which is not resourced, which does not have experts to deal with the issues of gender-based violence. We have social workers who are not really trained to deal with issues of gender-based violence. We have police, we have teachers who are not capacitated in especially dealing with issues of gender-based violence. There is an effort that is made, but from where I'm sitting, I still believe there's a lot to be done. There's a lot to look at so as to address the issues of gender-based violence. I still believe that we need to strengthen the policy and advocacy action, legal and policy reforms. There's a lot to be done in terms of policy. We cannot only have a policy, we need act of parliament where people are going to be mandated to do their work. With policies, we see that there is nothing that is happening. We need also to strengthen the GBV research and data system to support development of evidence-based programs. Currently, we are just shooting into the air. We don't have serious research on gender-based violence. The only research that was done on gender issues, I think it was done 10 years back. So it is now that captured the 67%. And I believe that we need to have periodical research on gender-based violence issues. And we need, as I was saying, that our police, our social workers, our teachers don't have the know-how on dealing with issues of gender-based violence. We need to capacitate the service, those who offer services for effective and quality gender-based violence services. And we cannot stop, but we need to continue educating and creating awareness. Last year, as the moderator was indicating that I do a lot of youth work. Last year, I was training 50 young people on issues of self-esteem, autonomy, and I realized that out of the 50, almost 70% of them had children below the age of 50. And they could not understand when I said that was defilement, that was not supposed to happen. And they said, but everybody here is doing it. So what's wrong with it? So we have normalized gender-based violence. We've normalized abuse to a point where now people don't even understand what defilement is all about because everybody is doing it. So public awareness should not cease. Public awareness should always be at the forefront when we are dealing with issues of gender-based violence. And we don't need to leave the boy child and the man behind, because if we train the boy child now to understand and to believe that he shares the same humanity with the girl child, we might improve the situation. Otherwise, if we are going to concentrate on empowering the girl child and leaving the boy child behind, the boy child will feel defranchised and then he will continue perpetrating issues of gender-based violence. So it is important to have the boy child and the girl child together to learn about gender-based violence so that they can be at the same wavelength in terms of dealing with gender-based violence. In conclusion, I believe that gender-based violence is a pandemic in Botswana. A culture of silence and the love of peace is making it worse. And as a nation, we need to now stop, think about it, and come up with ways of defeating this monster that we are faced with. We need to also look at issues of gender inequality so that we may try to level the ground and help the girl child to become a better person. We also need to have studies that will help in the programming of gender-based violence. We cannot do anything without evidence. And the sooner we put gender-based violence into the agenda, the better, in terms of saving and protecting those that are vulnerable. So thank you very much for listening to me.
Thank you, sir. Thank you for showing us this perspective of pandemic. The term pandemic generally meant for all of us here the current situation that we are handling, which relates to health. But it really doesn't look as if you're speaking for the first time on this topic on the issues of gender, sir. And you've so aptly brought out the condition, not just in your country, but many societies are facing this kind of a pandemic situation. You highlighted this different meaning of a pandemic. The condition of women needs to be taken up with so much passion. I feel gender-based violence is the culprit, and we all must work to improve the situation. The government, the NGOs, everybody is doing their bit. Probably there would be reforms. You have suggested reforms and policies, and the fact that we need to strengthen development in the area of gender mainstreaming. Thank you for all your ideas. Thank you for this presentation. Now, over to you, Dr. Lubna, for concluding this session.
Thank you, Dr. Verma. Good afternoon, everyone. It gives me an immense pleasure to propose the vote of thanks for this event to all the participants, collaborators, and distinguished speakers assembled here. I would like to thank the Bombay Teachers Training College Women Development Cell for collaborating with Department of Women's Studies, University of Calicut, Faculty of Humanities, University of Johannesburg, Ancient African Society for Women, Gender and Sexuality, Association for the Schools of Social Work in Africa for the online international conference on the theme Gender Mainstreaming Global Perspective. Gender parity is not just good for women, it's good for societies. Gender roles are a social construct. When we attempt to assign strength and weaknesses to either gender, we literally cut our potential as the human race in half. It has been indeed an enriching and reflective sessions, and was a pleasure hearing to the distinguished speakers. Our first speaker, Professor Vibhuti Patel, Indian Association for Women's Studies, India, spoke on the topic Gender Budgeting and Policy Perspectives for Mainstreaming Gender. Professor Vibhuti spoke about gender budget, gender empowerment, gender gap in 5 critical areas, and how gender responsive budget becomes a link in expressing voices of the people. She also listed the need of flagship for intervening the national policies and importance of financial decentralization on the gender relations and gender development process. The second speaker was Dr. Madhvi Venkatesan, Association of Schools of Social Work in Africa, enlightened us on the topic Gender and Economy, Value of Work. She reflected that we need to adopt better set of understanding on gender equity and equality. We use income as a proxy for human value, but we need to make sure that people can achieve their goals not based on gender bias. We need to stop giving value to the people in the form of dollars and cents based on the economy they make. We have with us Professor Shahana Rasool, University of Johannesburg, South Africa, Gender and Development. Professor Rasool threw light on gender inequality, why women are vulnerable and women's contribution to national economy. She also addressed the key factors that makes human vulnerable. She also pointed out the increasing demand of women's time is evident in household and economic benefits given by women are undervalued. And she also said that we need indicators and intervention strategies for gender roles. Lastly, she mentioned about violence against women, an important factor which hinders the achievement of sustainable development goals. We had with us Dr. Komotsko Jongman from Botswana, the ignored pandemic. Professor Jongman spoke about the gender-based violence in Botswana. He said that gender-based violence knows no social class and thus is an ignored pandemic because the cases are high and nobody is saying anything about it. It takes security and autonomy for the women, and we are not working hard to eradicate it in the culture. He also highlighted on the statistics of gender-based violence in COVID-19 pandemic. He pointed out that public awareness is the key to address gender-based violence. I would like to end this session with an insightful thought. The value of things is not the time they last, but the intensity with which they occur. That is why there are unforgettable moments and unique people. I end the session. I would like to inform the participants that the next session will begin at 2 o'clock. I request all the paper presenters, a schedule has been sent to you all with regard to the Google Meet, the session number, and the faculty in charge for that particular session. We request you all to join in by 1:50 or 1:55 so that we can begin the session and the paper presentation in time and complete the papers on time. We break for lunch and we meet at 2 o'clock in respective Google Meet links. I hope the paper presenters know their session as well as the Google link that they have to join to present their papers. Thank you once again. Good luck to all of you.
Thank you very much. Extremely educative session. And thank you for the opportunity. Thank you.
Thank you, ma'am.
Thank you. Excellent.
Those who are not presenting can still be a part of the sessions wherever they want to. It's nothing that you can't join, or since you're not presenting, you can be a part of the paper presentation. So I'm sure you have been sent a schedule for that also. So you're most welcome to join any of the session you like.
We can post the Google Meet links on the Telegram channel, and those who are not presenting papers can access the links through our Telegram channel post. We'll do that right away.
Thank you, Dr. Verma.